Ever get the feeling you've been cheated? Good night.
You've been described, or I think one of you has said you're a group that's unmanageable. Do you really feel that way about yourselves, that you're maybe unmanageable in the sense of being, forgive me, out of control?
We have a manager. We have a manager.
How's he doing?
He's doing...
We've had him before as well.
We've had him before.
What do you do?
What do I do?
What do you guys do all day?
Nothing.
Yeah. But punk is an answer to all the glitter and the stuff that costs a lot of money that you can afford.
Punk is just a rebellious rock for all kids.
She is a punk rock.
Honestly, whenever anything explodes in this house, it's always blame Vivian!
I just had to show that last bit. The Young Ones, the classic Young Ones, British television comedy with Adrian Edmondson as Vivian. And that was a great show, actually, because it featured a lot of bands. Even though it was a sitcom, it had The Damned on it and Motorhead, and there were a bunch of bands on it. Really good show, funny show. So welcome everybody. Thank you for joining me. My apologies for the 2-week hiatus for It's Only Talk and Roll, but even at my advanced age, I've gone back to work for a while. So, you know, got again the cash to spend on toys and games and shite like that. So, but thank you for joining me and for bearing with us. I can see a bunch of people in the chat already. Thanks, Zax, Benjamin Sotner, Mark D with a C. Hey, buddy. Anonymous, Zax, Brahma Bull, my drinking buddy, Captain Courtney, Spock, Rocket to Russia, great album, Pope Metallicus, The Lovely Sherry, Zax, I said already. You're getting 2 mentions. Mike DiCarlo, Cosmic Squirrel, the great Wrench of Wrenches, Just Another Red Shirt, and some people that are in the panel who we're just about to introduce. So I thought, wouldn't it be nice to do a punk special? Now, I know I'm a man who's been into all genres, grew up at a very right time for me to get into, you know, metal and rock and lots of pop stuff, whatever, but also as a teenager, punk hit, and I felt it was the right age to take advantage of all those genres. I feel very privileged because a lot of people just got stuck in one thing and they hated the other and whatever. I was never like that. So when punk hit as a 13, 14-year-old in the UK, extremely exciting because, you know, here was something that was a revolution. Because Britain was pretty revolting at the time, so something needed to be done about it. And these bands did something about it. So we're going to talk about that today. British stuff, American stuff, trying to focus on the early things, but people will obviously want to talk about their experiences with punk records and bands at later eras. So without further ado, I'll begin to introduce our amazing panel for today. So first of all, it's a man who streamed with in our recent Who special, and I'm hoping will be a regular panel member if I can come up with the cash. It's the Ayatollah of rock and roller, a man who's forgotten more about music than I would remember. It's Legalize Adulthood. How are you, my friend?
Oh, high praise indeed. High praise. Thank you. I don't deserve it.
You do. And I still love you for rocking the Keith Moon as Robert Newton. Good job. How have you been?
I'm doing good.
Good.
Typical Utah weather. It goes from like 45 degrees to 70 degrees in one day. So
yeah, exactly.
It's throwing me for a loop.
You can get burnt in a wildfire and then cooled by an avalanche in the same day. So.
Like California goes from green to brown, and we like spastically oscillate between winter and summer, and we call it spring, and then it just stays hot.
It's not like summer in Scotland, which is on a Tuesday this year, I believe. So.
That's right.
But anyway, thank you for joining me. Our next guest even has his own music or his own clip.
That's popcorn.
Buttered popcorn.
Popcorn chicken, come on.
it is, of course, my very good brother in YouTube, Darius Munchausen.
Hail, everybody.
Hail, Darius. You sound.
And thank you for having me on.
Oh, no problem, mate. I'm glad to have you back. I know you've been having some technical difficulties, but don't worry. The bionic implants will take soon. You'll be okay.
Well, thank you.
And I know you have a great knowledge of music, so I'm pretty sure you'll be on top of some of this stuff.
Hail, Darius.
Indeed.
Hey, Legalize.
So, also, we have a man who thought the damned drummer Rat Scabies was actually the price of a good night out, and who's particularly, I believe, into the bondage side, gear side of punk. He has an extremely small, studded cock ring. It is the Prince of the Punks, Toxic Man Flu.
Thank you for that wholly underwhelming and utterly humiliating, because it's so close to true introduction.
Well, it's punk we're talking about, so there's no respect.
It is punk. It is punk. And I have a very interesting punk background, and been called a punk many times, and been in fights with punks many times when I was on the shit kicker side of things. So it's going to be an interesting evening.
You'll be speaking from the other side of the fence then, from the other
Yes.
side of the divide.
Yes.
You're still a punk to us.
That's right.
Thank you very much, Darius. That means a lot.
You're not so much a mod or a rocker. You're more of a mocker.
More of that.
Yes.
That'll be interesting.
Great. Well, thank you for joining me, my friend. Joining us on our esteemed panel. But I'm very pleased to welcome. We've had the Prince of the Punks in Toxic, but we've got the Princess of the Punks. Deeply honoured once again to be joined in the stream by the blonde bombshell of the bass. It's Courtney. Well, once upon a time, the blonde bombshell of the bass.
Hi, guys. Sorry, I was muted. Yeah, not blonde anymore, but used to be. How are you doing?
Yes, we're doing good. How are you?
I'm doing awesome today. Thanks.
Yeah, and I know you have a particular set of skills in this area. You've played in bands, some of them quite well known. You've booked bands. You've been deeply immersed in this world and know a lot of these bands. So this is going to be awesome. Thank you for coming.
Cool. Yeah.
Cool. And finally, we have an extra special guest joining us for the first time on It's Only Talk and Roll, and I have to say that I'm deeply honoured that he's here. He is the pontiff of the Pixel Nation, the dean of the Dix Division. It is the one and only Comix Division.
Who am I? What am I doing here? And why did my producer invite me?
I don't know.
Hey.
How's it going?
Shut up and perform, monkey.
Yeah, I'd fire that producer right now.
Unfortunately, he's more useful to me hired than fired.
You're more used
Alive
to
than dead.
Alive than dead. Yeah. So now that you've joined the show, this means we truly are a bag of dicks, which we've certainly been called a few times.
Who are you calling a dick?
and
I suppose you could be a dickette, but
She's holding the bag.
Men can be dicks now, and women can be dicks now as well as men.
Yeah, I can be a major dick, actually. It's true.
As opposed to
I'm just
toxic.
a private dick.
The minor dick. And legalize the
Minor
private
dick. Yeah, it's a state of mind. It's a state of mind. I project huge.
Yeah. That's right. It's all in the attitude. And punk was all about attitude.
I identify.
So, just in true punk fashion, I would like to just say, fuck you all very much for joining me. It's very good of you to be here.
Well, thank you. You can run and play a go hide and fuck yourself as well.
That's right, and I probably will about halfway through. So,
well, it's nice to be here, you cheap daft cunt.
I wanted you to like me. I wouldn't have you around me.
That's right.
Oh boy.
See, we're a bunch of punks already. This is fantastic, and so I do want to be getting a lot of your guys. Hang on, I gotta show that message out. There's a lot of there'll be a lot of chat about punk, and we'll be showing a lot of that attitude. But I also want to say to the chat, you guys need to looking forward to you chipping in and commenting on some of the things we're going to be talking about and sharing your memories. Generally speaking, I'm going to be starting by talking about the origins of this thing and how we all got into it, and what that music meant to us, and still does mean, because punk by no means disappeared after the sort of era that I was looking at, which is the late 70s. It became an extremely strong sub-genre and is still going strong today. But yeah, so we'll talk a little bit about our favourite songs and our favourite albums, and I've got a couple of little montages to show later on. But for me, just to kick it off, as I say in the opening, excuse for a monologue in the opening, shambles of a monologue. I was just around at the right era, 13 years old in 1976, when this thing started appearing in TV and radio. I think somebody's dropped out. Legalize. Hopefully he'll come back in a minute. I got into that music at that time, having still been into kind of more old-fashioned, as you would call it, rock and prog, whatever. But there was a huge reaction to that in Britain. Music was huge. Huge productions. You needed a 3-ton drum kit if you were ELP, or like 6,000 lasers if you were the Who or whatever. And, so that was great for being seen and heard in space, but most of these guys, young guys then, they couldn't afford that equipment. They wanted a guitar, shitty old set of drums, and they just wanted to play in a pub or in a living room or whatever. So there was definitely that rebellion feeling to let's strip that shit away, get rid of the record company shit, and let's just start again, revitalize rock and roll. So that immediately grabbed a whole lot of guys in my age to get into that. And then, much as this stuff was banned a lot on British television, you couldn't see bands like the Pistols or the Clash or whatever. There were certain little shows would show them, and certain radio shows tried to promote them. So we started to hear it, and then the records came out. So. And then I found I can go to these concerts because I started to get to that era. So that was kind of how I got into it, and I had my favorite bands and albums. Comix, I mean, you I believe are heavily into punk and have been over the years. What's your kind of earliest experience with this wonderful genre?
God. So back in the 80s when I was growing up, I wasn't even a teenager yet. And my next door neighbor, she was probably about 6-7 years older than me. She was already in high school, kind of goth, but listened to punk music. And she introduced me to the Dead Milkmen. And I had to be like around 10, 11, maybe 12. I don't know. I mean, it was, but yeah, it's like, all right. First song I heard was Bitchin' Camaro. And it's like, I was completely freaking sold. And I ended up getting a copy of the tape and whatnot. And it was pretty awesome.
Cool.
And it wasn't until later, probably when I was in high school, a friend of mine introduced me to GBH, and I started kind of getting a little bit more into punk then. Of course, Misfits. Not really big into Danzig, but just fucking Misfits were amazing.
And these were bands that you had the opportunity to see live, or
unfortunately, no. I mean, I didn't. I'm trying to remember what was the first punk show I actually saw. I'm totally drawing a blank. But
I'll come back to you, mate.
But I mean, that as far as like the bands I've actually seen live that I recall, I've seen H2O, I've seen the Dwarves, Dropkick Murphys, No Effects. Let's see. Cool. God damn it. I've seen Rancid as well. Bad Religion. I've gone to the Warped Tour several times, which is obviously a great place to see a bunch of bands.
Yeah, what is it about this genre? And I mean, you're not genre exclusive. I know you like a lot of stuff. But what is it about this particular genre that grabs you, for instance?
Oh man, I think a lot of it's definitely the rebellion aspect, the kind of like anti-government vibes at times, and not just one side, right? Just like criticizing government, criticizing society where it needs to be criticized. Yeah, I mean it's and just the sound too, man. I just fucking love the sound of punk rock.
We talked about this backstage the other night, you and I, after one of your shows, and it was. The rebellion thing was definitely not along party lines in Britain at the punk. It became that eventually, but at first it was very much an anti-establishment thing.
Yes.
Not so much we support this side of the establishment. So that was important,
Oh yeah, and that's something that I think punk has kind of turned into, supporting the establishment rather than being anti-establishment.
Yeah.
But it's like when you're a teenager and you're basically rebelling against your parents, society, whatever. I mean, punk just really kind of speaks to you. Even when I get older, I mean, just like what we see now going on in society with so much conformity, it's like you still kind of need that rebellion, because it kind of makes people think about stuff. If you buy too much into, I want to say the narrative, but just what is kind of being perpetuated by society, it doesn't make you think about stuff, I think.
Yeah. And I think the music goes along with it because it's generally aggressive, fast, strong vocals, with a lot of lyrical content that isn't just Moon June and whatever.
But it's kind of weird because, like, if you take a look at like the Ramones compared to the Sex Pistols, completely different styles of punk rock. Because the Ramones are very slow; they're not hardcore like Sex Pistols or GBH or other.
And I think we're definitely
going
to. Yeah, you've touched upon an important thing, and something I wanted to talk about later was the very different styles, particularly between the UK and the US. So we're definitely going to go back to that.
Well, even East Coast versus West Coast.
Yeah, well, this is it. New York, California, two different styles entirely. But Courtney, my dear, you obviously huge experience in immersed in the music world. What's your earliest memories of this exciting genre that we all got into?
My earliest memories are pretty much listening to Dead Milkmen was a big one for me because they're a Philly band. So I grew up in Philadelphia. But when I actually went to
sorry, Courtney, I should point out to YouTube that the Dead Milkmen isn't someone buried in Courtney's backyard. It is a band.
Well, it's funny. One of my teenage friends is in the chat, Benjamin Sopner. Hi, Ben. I actually went to the prom with him, and it wasn't even at my school, but I had a big pink well, not a big pink mohawk. I had the more Wendy O. Williams mohawk, and the school photographer took pictures of me. I didn't go to the school, and apparently it was like in the slideshow and stuff for their school, which is kind of funny. But he goes back, we go back, way back. So one of my first punk shows actually was at a place on South Street called JC Dobbs, and it was my first punk show. And it was the Sloppy Seconds, who are a bunch of funny guys, I should just say. They were more on like the pop kind of, the like crass kind of poppy side. Not crass as in the band crass.
Kind of like more like a Dickies style.
A little bit more like that, yeah. And the Dickies are another one. The Dickies, like I love the Dickies. Fun fact, I actually play Pokemon Go with the guitarist from the Dickies. He plays Pokemon Go with me.
That's cool.
Who would have known?
I love that humor. I mean, punk, it's got an angry, aggressive rap, but there's a lot of humor in there. Like you saw the Clash there, laughing a joke. Absolutely. They were just guys. They've got humor too. So the Dickies were very funny. Love that band.
The Banana Split song when they covered that. That was just like
I had a ticket to see them in a club in Edinburgh and it got cancelled, so I was really upset and then I missed my chance. So I never saw them back in the day.
They're fun.
Yeah.
They're fun to see live. But yes. Go on.
No, I was going to say you've seen a lot of these bands up close, so you've probably had some really good concert experiences. And the local part is interesting, as you were in Philly. It still wasn't global entertainment then. There was still regional and local stuff, and I loved that. Each city had its bands, and the smart people would find out what the bands were in the other city as well. So that was a big part of punk, and the circuit that they played on. And in Britain, it was the pub rock thing. These guys played in pubs, and then kind of moved out of those. But there was a big pub circuit, which really grew punk from the ground up. So. Until they all got banned, but
You talk about the local thing, and I definitely had the local thing, but I had friends in LA. I would travel there to go to shows. I used to travel a lot to go see shows. And actually in the late 90s, they had a punk rock music festival that they ended up bringing to the US one year. But it was called Holidays in the Sun, and they used to hold it in Morecambe, England,
which
was great. It was like this small little like seaside town and be overrun by punks, like from all of
I never went, but I had a very good friend that was in the military with. He used to go to that.
Yeah, it was. That was where I saw all the UK bands. I mean, they would have everybody come play. Back to
that would be fun. Holidays in
Light
the sun.
Squad. Like,
I think they should have done them under the Trades Descriptions Act because there wouldn't be any sun.
I know there was definitely no sun, and it was like an old retirement almost. Like everyone stayed in bed and breakfast. Like
it'd be like a Butlins. They used to call them holiday camps. They were rough, pretty rough. Well, that's cool. So I think Courtney might be frozen. Anyway, we'll come back to Courtney and thank you for that.
Happens.
And it happens. Yeah, she's stunned by our witty repartee.
We'll go with that.
We'll go with that. So Legalize, my friend. What's your? You and I obviously are huge Who fans, and we talked about that. And the Who had some connections with punk, and were certainly admired by the punks. One of the few classic bands that were. What's your experiences with? What were the first records you heard or concerts you went to in this genre?
In in high school, most of my friends were older, and there was a guy who was either I think he was 3 years ahead of me. So like I was a freshman, he was a senior, and I think he had Rocket to Russia. He had a couple Ramones albums on vinyl. I think it was Rocket to Russia, and then because I was growing up in a university town, the university would get bands to come and play, which was the only way that we would ever see something without going to Philly or New York. And the Ramones came to my town and played a gymnasium. So it wasn't serving any alcohol. So it was all ages. And me and all my teenage friends, we were 14, are in there listening to the Ramones, and there's 50 other people there with us. And it was just insane. And I bought a concert t-shirt, and I had one of the, I had a couple of autographs. I got their autographs and a Sharpie, but because I liked wearing the shirt so much, eventually the autographs washed out. So I don't have any, not without some kind of, CSI image recovery aid, do I have any proof that they signed my shirt? But that was my first real punk show. And then right around the same time, Rock and Roll High School came out. And so me and all my friends were way into that movie.
Great stuff. Yeah, that was the tour I finally saw the Ramones on, was that Rock and Roll High School tour in the UK. It was just such good fun. But to see them to me, a gym in a high school is the ideal environment for the Ramones.
God. Yeah.
It was a university gym, but it was just a big gymnasium hall.
They're like the
whole basketball games.
America's high school band, almost. That's exactly perfect. I actually remember, I was probably going to talk about it later, but when they were asked once what who they wanted to be, whether they were, what kind of band do you want to be? Do you want to be like the Sex Pistols, blah 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 blah? And I think it was Johnny said, no, we want to be the Bay City Rollers. They wanted to make little pop tunes, but very loud. But yeah, I'd love to have seen them in that venue. That would have been awesome. Was there really no alcohol? I mean, did people can sneak shit in,
Well, maybe students did, but this is at University of Delaware, and Delaware doesn't allow, it's not completely locked down like Pennsylvania, but it's still, the alcohol sale is controlled, it's licensed and everything. So,
I mean, you can only buy it from the state store.
Well, that's Pennsylvania. We're not as bad as that. Well, I say we, but I haven't lived there forever. But it's not as bad as that.
These state differences, we didn't really have that.
The main thing is you can't buy anything to take out on Sunday, so people drive to Maryland to State Line Liquors, where they buy their beer on Sunday and then drive it home.
The whole concept of driving across state lines to do something was always very exotic to us in Britain. Personally, for you guys, it'd be a pain in the ass. So yeah, thank you for that, sir. So Darius, my friend, I think we've lost Courtney again. Unfortunately, she was frozen. But Darius,
she'll be back.
You've talked about a lot of bands in the past that you're very familiar with. But what did you notice early on in your music listening that could be classed as the punk genre?
Well, early on, I didn't really know much of anything. It wasn't until I got to college and joined the radio station, and that was like a hyperbolic time chamber of music. And I've always had a problem with authority, as you may have noticed. And so, there's something attractive about that in the music. Yeah. And now I wasn't listening to punk right away, but I was listening to like metal and industrial music. And I noticed how much of an influence punk had on all these other genres, even grunge, and to an extent, electronic music. And so at the radio station, I was essentially working backwards in time, from the present, back through the decades. And so that was really how I got exposed to, early bands like Sex Pistols, Ramones, Buzzcocks. People my age were going to see Rancid, like you said, Bad Religion. I knew a kid in high school who had Dead Kennedys. I remember asking him, Dead Kennedys? What does that mean? He's like, oh, dude, you don't know.
And again, to Mama Susan on YouTube, the Dead Kennedys are not buried in Darius's backyard. There is a band. Although,
no, but it's funny.
It's possible one or two of them are. But
we have the car that JFK was shot in at a museum near Detroit.
Hello.
True story.
Oh, yeah.
Can you hear me?
You live anywhere near Chappaquiddick?
Yeah. That's right.
No.
That's the other car. That's the other
car.
car.
Something like a refreshing dip in Chappaquiddick, is there? Yeah.
That's,
Too soon.
Good old was it Ted Kennedy?
Yeah. I just love that name of the Dead Kennedys. I mean, how much more could you stick it up conventional establishment America than calling yourself the Dead Kennedys?
Well, plus you have to consider at the time they came up with that name, the Kennedys had been elevated to the level of American royalty.
Yes.
Right.
So to express disrespect to the Kennedys would evoke immediate disgust in many people, and it wasn't a partisan thing. It's because he was assassinated live, right? On TV.
I suspect you didn't see a lot of them on television. Because of that. But same in Britain, there's certain bands like you never saw the Sex Pistols on television to start with. But I love the.
There's a LA punk band that was able to perform on Saturday Night Live exactly once because they got banned after their performance.
Well, it's kind of funny that you mentioned that, the whole thing with like going against the norms of the day. It's kind of funny. Like if I was to start a punk band, I would just call it Two Genders.
It's not quite edgy enough.
I know, but it's like it
is now.
Just give it a couple of years, it might be.
I always thought a good name. I always thought a good name for a punk band would be Feedback. It's got to have been taken already by somebody, right? It's so obvious.
Oh no, I've heard that again.
Feedback.
I've heard that again and again and again. That name.
Yeah.
There's a joke.
Yeah.
See what you did
well,
there.
that would be reverb, not feedback.
That's true.
It?
So how's this part more edgy? How about fuck your 32 genders?
Yes, that would be a great name.
All one word.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they're so outdated already because that's only 32 genders. I mean, it should be fuck your 98
fuck your multiple genders.
Yeah, that would be their rebranded names, to stay relevant. But cool.
Everybody's such an edgelord now, at least wannabe. It's hard to come up. It's hard to say anything that actually disgusts people or offends them because everybody's so jaded and worn down by just the craziness of everyday life.
I think for us older people, that's the case. For the younger crowd, they'll hear that and they're like, "Oh my god!"
Yes.
Have you actually?
Oh, they definitely have limits.
Like that?
What's that?
Have you actually met anybody that really is like that? Because I haven't.
I've met a few.
I mean, in IRL, not that many. I have met a few. I mean, I met
a few people who were, sensitive to, like, oh, dude, you told a joke about an Asian. That's just not cool. I met people like that.
I was actually taking music lessons, and the guy that I was, we were talking about this stuff. This is like years ago. And he was working the floor, and this lady left the store, and he says, "You have a good day, ma'am." And she turned around and screamed at him, "Are you assuming my gender?" And it's like, and he didn't know how to react. I mean, this shit does happen. I personally haven't run into it, but I know people who have. Of course, majority of the time, it's shit that we see online or lives at TikTok or something like that. But You know,
People get
it has
braver
happened.
online, you know, keyboard warriors and all that.
True.
Indeed. And that's it's hard
you
to.
know, I've bumped into it kind of, you know, slightly. I mean, at karaoke, you know, a bar has always got people that are in their 20s. So I like it because it gives me a chance to just kind of socialize with people younger than me and find out if the world really has gone to shit or if there's still hope. And as far as I'm concerned, there's still hope. So it's
I think there is too, but a lot of the stuff where I see it personally is actually in the HR departments of the companies I've worked for.
I try to interact with an HR department as little as possible.
Oh, I do too. But this is shit that they push, though. It's, you know.
Yeah, I've been lucky. Stuff hasn't really been actively pushed in the places I've worked at so far.
Yeah, so I think it's hard to imagine going back to the days that I got into punk, where the Clash, the Pistols, the Damned, and I've been to a few of not so much their gigs, but smaller punk bands in cities that I was in, and it's hard to imagine anybody there giving a shit about that kind of thing, and even trying to censor anybody for that. I mean, these were robust atmospheres at those gigs where people didn't give a fuck.
They had skin as thick as the crust of a planet. These people were not going to be easily bent out of shape over anything.
And it wasn't like they were necessarily nasty. I mean, there's an image of aggressive punks in people's mind. There was a lot of people were pretty progressive, but there was no, oh, you can't say that. It would be, fuck you. Who the fuck are you? Get out of here.
Yeah.
Which I think is great. It's that freedom and anarchy part that really appealed, as well as the fact the music was kick-ass. But in Britain at the time, going back to the British origins of punk in '76, you had a country that was reeling from unemployment, recession, it's just in desperate straits. There was, gas shortages and food shortages and prices skyrocketing. And this was all under a Labour government. So it wasn't like it was, taking a right or a left side. The punks were rebelling against that. They were kind of the working class representatives. In a way, they felt the established bands were no longer. As you look at and I love prog and metal and whatever. Those metal bands, maybe we could get away with it, but a lot of the prog bands, the pop acts, they were so far remote from that these guys felt they had nothing musically or socially representing them. So the punk just took off like a rocket to Russia. Give them
punk is how we found out about that side of Britain, because we all just picture Britain being like an Emily Bronte novel.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, and if there was probably a band called Emily Bronte's Dressage or something, I don't know.
See, I always pictured Britain as an extended Monty Python skit. To me, Monty Python, where Monty Python ended and Real Britain began, there was no dividing line. I just assumed it was all like that.
Yeah, it was a pretty depressing place at the time, from what I can remember. So it's not to say that punk became glamorous, because it was the opposite of that, but it certainly gave a kick up the arse to record companies, to the rock establishment, and to the societal establishment of Britain, and the music reflected that, and a lot of the angst in the music. And they certainly, they weren't writing love songs, other than the Damned, who wrote a song called the Love Song. It was these songs were deliberately not about that, and not that they were all political by any means. A lot of it was just about partying, having a good time, making a racket, and about music itself, which I liked as well. So. Thanks for coming back, Courtney. And
yeah, sorry about that. The internet went completely down, so I had to restart the computer and all that. But I was sitting backstage for a little bit, in all fairness.
Well, I'm glad you're here. But
I don't get the treatment I used to get.
Yeah, you're the princess of the punks, so you're going to be here. Prince of the Punks, by the way, is a great song by the Kinks, but that's another story. Another band that they didn't necessarily get rejected by the punks, because they didn't like a lot of the classic bands, but the Kinks got a pass from some of them. So Toxic, my friend, did you have the chance to chime in? I can't remember about your experience.
I don't think he has.
No, it's your turn. You're on the clock. You've got 60 minutes.
60 minutes. Can I fill that up? Ask Comix, and I probably can.
I've heard that you can't, but that's a different story.
Oh, hey, what you talk about with a wife, that stays between you two. Leave me out of that. Excuse me.
So yeah, what's your experiences, buddy? I mean, you're roughly of similar age to me, so.
Yeah. So I mean, there was the whole thing with Sid and Nancy, the movie that came out in the 90s. Of course, that was kind of influential there. But I grew up in a place where mostly country music, and there was some rock and mostly like the sound coming out of Austin as that was starting to come out, blues and that. And I spent a lot of time in blues clubs, but coming up from the Southern rock. So you had that stuff that was happening in the late 60s and 70s and comes from Leonard Skinner and all that. It made it up to this part was called outlaw country. So outlaw country brought in rock and roll to country music, and you had the purists in country, like on Blues Brothers. We have both kinds of music, country and Western, those kind. And then they brought in this rock and roll element. And there many people thought that Alabama wasn't a country band, they're a pop band, so there was that back and forth. And I heard people like Waylon Jennings, take this job and shove it. And Willie Nelson, who was smoking dope and doing all that kind of stuff. And Hank Williams Jr., right? And they were all party, F you, we're out doing this, we're having fun kind of music. And it was just with a country twang to it. And so I was kind of into that scene, just in a different way. And then what really got me into punk was a television show called Quincy, which starred, was it Klugman? Jack
Klugman.
Jack Klugman as a medical examiner in California. And in the 80s, when I was a younger pup, they were talking about the violence at punk shows, and they had like several murders that were made by punks. I'm like, what the heck is that? So I started got into Black Flag, Circle Jerks. A lot of stuff was in Orange County. And the Orange County punk scene was very violent. They were very anti-hippie. We're not dealing with we just don't want you to like us. Like I said earlier in the show, they don't care. If we wanted you to like us, we wouldn't want you to come to the shows. And they were just there having fun. It was anti everything. And you had the skateboarding people coming in at that time. A lot of people think skateboarding in California, it was all, the Beach Boys kind of stuff and all that. No. That was the surfing. The skateboarders were anti-surfers. And so you had the surfers, dude, I got to go surfing. Yeah, you hang 10. The skateboarders were totally opposite in how they thought about that. And that punk music kind of got into that. So the music I was hearing out of Orange County, like Darius, I went to college, went in college radio, and there were all kinds of music that was just open up. English bands that I'd never heard of. And
was that the first time you've been exposed to a lot of the British bands then at that point?
What my first exposure to a British punk band was in one of my favorite movies of all time called The Party Animal.
Right.
And The Party Animal had 4 or 5 songs by the Buzzcocks. Title track, I think, was REM. And I was watching the show and heard the song Why Can't I Touch It by the Buzzcocks. And was phenomenal. So I started looking for everything that I could. And one of the great things that we had where I grew up was a place called Starship Records and Tapes. So it was somebody's house. It was near the college. You go in there and they had a head shop. I think we all know what that is. And they had wall to wall imports in this 2-story house everywhere. And I got into all kinds of bands and I bought everything Buzzcocks I could find. I bought everything by the Flesh Tones I could find just off of that album there. I got at Green Day, they didn't seem to be as much. But there was one song called The General. I don't know who did that. That was from that album, or from that movie.
Was that more of a ska thing, or am I getting mixed up with something?
The General, I think, was the Untouchable. I think it was ska, because they had some, because there was ska that was part of this. It kind of got in, But that's where I started getting into the English bands around that. And that led to, okay, well, I saw this movie, Sid and Nancy came out. What is that all about? And then I started getting into the Sex Pistols and other things from there. But I still, I tell you that the outlaw country, which there's offshoots of that called Red Dirt and Texas Flood and some other offshoots from that. So it kind of tells you where I grew up. If you took Hank Williams Jr., right, and you took anyone like Johnny Rotten or anybody else from the Sex Pistols, you put them together, they're going to have the party and the FU attitude. They would probably sit there and jam all night. Okay, yeah, you're country, yeah, we're rock, but I think they would do that from a musical standpoint. That's not what happened back in Orange County, but we can talk about that later.
Interestingly enough, the Clash have always been, a lot of their records were quite what you would call Americana. I mean, they revered the old rock and roll and those attitudes. And, you know, whilst a lot of the British bands kind of sneered and disdained that stuff, the Clash are sneakily quite rock and roll. Old-fashioned rock and roll, you know? With
the only band that matters.
Yeah, they really were. Yes, they were really quite musical. I mean, these are guys that come out of the pub rock scene. The Clash have been playing in that scene since the early 70s. So they were pretty well-schooled musicians. They may have tried to hide it, but so they did revere a lot of that. And they made records with guys like Joe Ely and later Brian Setzer, and so they were more into the American stuff than they would admit, I think. Some of it quite rock and roll, country, rockabilly, whatever.
I mean, but that's the punk from the rock and roll side. When you're looking at the Orange County stuff, no. We are talking about some hardcore bands out there, the Black Flags, the Circle Jerks, the Minutemen.
Yeah.
I mean, these were angry people just letting out. They tired of the hippies, tired of everything was going on. And at the time when this was in the 70s, late 70s, when you started having this come up, is when the whole oil crisis happened. And there were people losing their jobs left and right in the U.S. And where I lived, they moved all the oil stuff down to Houston. And the entire area was just decimated when it came to jobs. So there was a big exodus, people moving around. There was a lot of angst. There was a lot of, coming off the Vietnam War, we were starting to get a picture of just how much we had been lied to about the Vietnam War and why we were there. There was that feeling that we lost. There was very much an America in decline feeling.
Well, that mirrors the British experience. Right. And I guess we talked earlier, Comix mentioned it, and we've talked earlier about the differences between the strands of punk. British punk was very aggressive, raw, was very anti-establishment. The New York scene was much more arty because it had grown out of things like the Velvet Underground and that kind of thing. The CBGB scene, apart from the Ramones, was quite arty. The California stuff seemed to be a bit more like the British stuff. It was loud, it was aggressive, it was a fuck you, anti-establishment. Is that a fair summary? Because I'm the only Brit on the panel here. I mean, you guys are Americans.
I would say so. I would say the British stuff that I heard, there was more musicality to it. So there was more of an influence of like from the mods and all that stuff that came down from there, right? So it seems the punk was a more organic musical thing in England, and in the U.S., the punk that I know about was more of a reaction to society. It was a pendulum swinging, right? So you had the hippies and free love and Peter, Paul, and Mary and all that kind of folk stuff, and then it swung back the other way from there. And though some of those bands later got musicality into it, I don't think anybody can say that the Circle Jerks are a bunch of great musicians. But
I think a lot of these guys, the punk guys, hid their musicality very well until later they did develop and evolve into more new wave, and then just
it's pretty funny because Gibby Haynes actually went to college in San Antonio. He went to Trinity, and legend has it that he the house he lived in, they had like a cannon, and every morning at like it was like 7 or 8 a.m., he'd go and fire it in the morning, pissing off the neighbors.
I almost went to Trinity College back in the late 80s, so I know it well.
I think it depends on what bands you heard about first. I mean, I'd heard of, a couple songs by Dead Kennedys, but, that stuff wasn't getting played on the radio. So unless you knew somebody who owned it, you weren't going to hear it. And I remember hearing a little bit of it at the time going like, it's just kind of shit music. I like the attitude, but I'll take the Ramones, thanks, because their songs are simplistic. It's not like some kind of 7-part layering thing going on, but they're
they also knew how to play.
Well, they're accessible. They're much more accessible. Yeah.
And if you want to pull up a band, nobody's really talked about the LA punk scene much, but if you take a band like Suicidal Tendencies, now that band, that first album is very musical and has a lot of things going on. It's not just fuck you, we don't care, but it is definitely punk in attitude.
You can tell
a lot of those bands got very political.
Right.
The LA scene was very political. Yes. I mean, Dead Kennedys aren't Dead Kennedys coming out of LA and not New York?
Yeah, they're the LA band, aren't they? I thought they were anyway. Same as the Dickies and then X bands like that. There was a whole LA scene.
We should have Gary in here.
Well, there was the LA scene, and then that kind of faded out to the Orange County scene. So your LA scene had the Dead Kennedys, the Go-Go's came out of that, right? In San Francisco Bay Area in LA. So
what about Iggy Pop?
Well, this is more where I was getting. It was giving some consideration to the origins of punk, and certainly some of it was influenced by garage bands from the 60s, and then really when you got into the 70s, guys like Iggy and the Stooges were huge influence on those bands, and of course we're still around when the US punk scene
Joan Jett
particularly kicked in.
No,
I don't think you can underestimate the effect that Joan Jett had on music.
No, she was pretty badass.
She was very much, I'm doing this. This is my music. I don't care. I'm going to be sexual about it. Tough. And it's the attitude, I think, that pervasive goes down.
Yeah, and I think Joan might have been more of influenced and then became an influencer. There's really seminal guys were Iggy, the MC5, the New York Dolls, who were for a while managed by Malcolm McLaren of the Sex Pistols. In fact, that's probably his gear they're wearing, because he had the shop Sex in London with Vivienne Westwood, which was a huge focus of the punk scene in London. And he was over in New York for a while, tried to make a thing out of the Dolls. That's such one toxic. I could see you wearing that.
I have worn that.
Yes.
And if I get my way as producer, Comix will be in a mini version of one of those.
That's right. Yeah. So
God no, you're fired. You're fired. You're fired.
So they were hugely influential, and they were extremely well known in Britain too. These bands, and then Lou Reed and the Velvet
I just
Underground.
realized I was muted. I was just going to say I got to see the Dolls.
I hope they weren't wearing the red outfits there, but that plastic must have sweated like hell into the lines.
I'm sure it did. And I'm sure it stank.
Yeah. And then Lou Reed is another huge influence. What's funny about all of these acts is they're American acts. And the same with the British bands of the 60s. They took American music and then re-exported it back as British punk with all those influences in it, I think. And then Alice Cooper actually had a big part to play for me in this. His stage persona of the band, the attitude of the music, couldn't really call it heavy metal. It was much spikier than that. And I think there's a lot of, like, John Lydon, Johnny Rotten's audition for the Pistols was singing School's Out. So those guys were into that stuff. And then David Bowie, of course, was huge. From a British perspective, certainly. I can't speak for the American bands.
There's an outfit that we need to see 70s in right there.
Yeah, that's what I'm wearing right now. My legs are better than that, though. Sturdy. All three of them are better than But those were kind of, to me, the sort of the seminal guys that and they were still around in 76, 77. So the guys that were into into forming punk bands, most of them would cite these guys in Britain certainly as being their influences. And they took that and they like most innovative genres do, they take it and do something else with it.
A lot of these bands are still around. I mean, like some of them, and they were around for several decades, and they seem to have more steam than some of the others. Because like disco was a couple of years where that took over the world. Then you had, kind of punk came on, and then grunge, and that there's we were talking about this a couple of days ago, talking about the show. Just the musical pop, the normies that would come in and take this stuff and move it around, right? So you see in some of the bands that were more commercially successful, do you say that they sold out or that they were just, I don't know what they were doing. The labels picked them up and they put them on the radio, because a lot of this stuff, no way you could put that on the radio in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. Absolutely not. Not even an underground college stuff. The FCC had shut you down. So if you didn't go to the shows, and if they didn't like you and let you know where the show was, you weren't getting into this. So I think the music reflects that this was a movement more than anything else. At least that's my opinion. Everybody else looks disappointed, so go right for it.
I have to agree. I think to a certain degree, punk did end up selling out. I mean, a lot of these band members, they're doing this, it's their job, right? And it's to make money. But one of the things that kind of sucked about the Warped Tour is, you got to see all these great bands, but you get to see them basically beg for money. Hey, we got a new album out, go buy it. And it's like, dude, that's like the least fucking punk thing you can do. It's like, I understand this is how you make your money, and I totally respect that. But you could at least said, hey, we have a new album out. We would all appreciate it if you go and support us. That to me is a lot more punk rock than, hey, we got a new album. I mean, that's something that fucking Metallica does, or I want to say Twisted Sister, but just like Def Leppard or something like that. Something that was like a lot more mainstream.
Yeah, so let's push our
I think
product.
Warped Tour was good for a lot of the newer, like the bands that, like, a lot of them are my age. Like, I knew a lot of them in college, so to say. It was good for those bands to kind of get larger, But,
yeah, I mean, it was great because
like
I got to see Rancid and Bad Religion and No Effects, but the kind of downside is that it became very corporate, and that's kind of the problem with punk, is that it's like it stopped being about this rebellious aspect, and it just became hey, we're hooking up with Vans, which is a large corporation, and we're just gonna make money off it.
So this is the punkiest.
I think a lot of that
guy
happened when
on the
Green
panel.
Day. When Green Day came out, not came out when Green Day got popular. I think that was a big change for all of that kind of making it corporate.
Yeah, I think pop punk is really that kind of influenced that. Like Blink-182, Green Day, like you said. I'm trying to remember where their pop punk bands.
Yeah, I see
but
Green Day as
even the
very much
Dickies were
pop
considered
punk,
kind
not
of
real
like
punk.
Pop punk, like in a sense of like the style of music. So it's different. It depends on your definition of pop punk. Like popular punk, or like the sound, of the poppier, like the fast kind of upbeat, more melodic.
I agree with you, but I would say Green Day are a band that I definitely see as being a pop punk band, not a real punk band, no matter how much they posture.
Yep. I agree.
They're cartoon punk band to me. That's just me. Other people may love them.
I was more going with the reference between like the Dickies, so to say, who are very kind of poppy sounding, and like Green Day definitely falls under the popular punk.
And I agree with you, 70s. As much as I do like some of Green Day's albums, they are very much pop punk.
They are, and I hate to use, don't hate to use it, the word posers.
Yes.
And in fact, I've got a section later I want to talk about punk or poser, but then I've got some pictures. But I see them as kind of being posers a little bit. It doesn't mean to say they don't make great records, but they're not. They're just really
commercial.
Punks.
Is what
they are completely commercial.
They're cosplaying as punks.
Yeah.
The thing is now is that as an individual or as a group of people, you can reach people over the internet directly. So you don't, it used to be the reason you would kind of sell out is because you made the trade-off to make a deal with this corporate entity called a record company so that you could get your music out there. And if you got their music out there, there was a chance that, when you came and booked a show, a gig in a town, that you could sell the tickets, right? You didn't have to be the opening act. You could be the lead act or the head act. And
right.
The weird thing is now you can reach people more easily, but then how do you build enough of a following in a geographic location to be able to go play a show there and be able to sell the tickets? It's kind of weird.
Yeah.
Right.
In a weird sort of way, I mean, a lot of what bands could do now is they could do stuff virtually. They could basically play live, either live stream it or whatnot.
Sure, but it's
I know it's not the same.
It's like,
I think that works
like in
better
Fortnite.
it does work a little bit better that when they've got an invited audience, maybe even in a very small place, even their house, to have some crowd atmosphere. But that
You're
does
right.
work. That does work. Yeah.
I mean,
I was watching a document. Sorry, go ahead.
I go to karaoke and sing, but if I go to the bar and it's empty, I leave, because if I wanted to sing to an empty room, I just play Rock Band at home. The people being there is important part of the reason why I'm there.
So, by the way, Legalize is a brilliant singer. I've seen, he sent me a couple of clips of him singing karaoke. He is brilliant. So, just saying.
know
that.
Darius
Legalize, you
uses
look like
auto-tune.
someone I hung out with
Yeah.
in that photo.
Not for
And
karaoke,
that
I
is-
don't.
That is Legalize on the screen right now. In
Yeah, that photo looks the
1986.
Yeah, this is I had the blonde mohawk not shaved on the side but buzzed down, and then I got a job in France after I graduated college and worked there for a while. And
I don't know. I think you're heading
People
towards
were-
a flock of seagulls there. If you let it grow
people
longer.
were like, "Oh, it's the punk engineer." I was kind of talked about in the company because I was like this guy from
Shaved your
America.
head.
That's
They have
funny.
a
I have a
punk in
couple friends
France.
that are like IT people in offices and stuff like that. Like proper corporate offices, and they can go dressed however they want, and it's kind of
Was
same
it the
thing.
mods that had the long hair? Right. So kind of the shaving it with the mohawk, and that is kind of a reaction to what was popular
I
at the
don't
time.
think mods had the mohawk thing. They
No,
had very
I've
No,
never
well
no, no,
seen
no.
mods
That's
with
not what I'm saying. The
sculpted
mods had the
hair.
longer hair.
Well, they had
Right,
longer
no.
hair for the time, yeah, but then
No.
so did the rockers, Just Commander Ed Straker there mentioned the Cramps. That there is the first time I saw the Police, and the support band were the Cramps.
That's fucking awesome.
Nice.
Yeah, and this
I
was
love the
before
Cramps. I
Roxanne
can't
was a
believe you
hit
saw the
as well.
Police.
Yeah, this was before Roxanne became a hit, so they were.
You
Not
suck.
that
My
long
father
ago.
and sister look alike.
That was a great gig. I have to tell you right now, that was a great gig.
Excellent.
Did you actually see the Pistols live?
No, I didn't, because they banned them everywhere. So they did the To God Save the Queen tour. They only ended up playing about 3 gigs because they got banned by every council. They suffered a lot of suppression because they were seen as insulting the Queen. They were filthy and loudmouthed and blah 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 blah. A lot of that was partly generated by Malcolm McLaren for publicity, partly because people just reacted so badly to them. And I'm actually going to show a little bit of that later. I made a little my top 5 Pistols moments video, and they sometimes they were just reacting to the way people reacted to them. So if someone
So did they
treated them
invent getting shadow banned?
They did. That's absolutely correct. They did. So
It's
councils
just an outright ban.
Yeah.
They knew they were banned. It wasn't like it was a secret.
The moral panic of the day. Oh, we're city council. We're going to ban them from playing in this club, and so they couldn't get a gig anywhere. So, but they were fascinating.
Doors. That happened to the Doors. Of course, when you get that drunk and show your genitalia to the crowd, you kind of
Allegedly.
Well, allegedly. And
Allegedly,
you wouldn't have had that problem, Toxic, because they wouldn't be able to see anything. So
that's correct, because it is so big, it is hard to see it all in one setting.
I didn't realize we invited Drew to the stream.
We didn't, but this he's still here somewhere, even though we didn't invite him. I think I can see him outside.
Yeah, he's
the
never
window.
far.
He's never far away from anybody on earth. But yeah, the British scene had an awful lot of that spiky aggression, but underneath there was a musicality. But the American stuff, like the Ramones and so on, had a very different flavour. I think the Ramones were the closest to the British scene, but I've got some bands to throw up here. And forgive me, I'm a one-man production show, so I don't have a producer like some people.
Just an executive
that was
producer.
a recent. That was.
I have an executive producer. Darius is my executive producer, but I'm not quite sure what that means.
Means he
It'll
gets
tell
to
me-
take
I'm not
credit
either.
if it's a success.
Yeah. So some of my the American bands that I was certainly aware of in the late 70s, early 80s, and was into would be guys like this. So we got Bad Religion, pretty good band, you know. I think they were Californian. No?
Bad Religion. Yeah.
Yeah, they were a Californian band. It took a while, but we certainly started to hear about bands like that. And a lot of the time it was actually in record stores because you couldn't hear them on the radio. So
Oh yeah, man! I remember seeing their album covers, and just like, you know, that definitely those covers definitely evoked a visceral reaction with certain people.
Exactly.
It's funny because they became kind of a Warped Tour band.
Yeah,
so
no,
to
they
say,
absolutely
like in the
did. That's
years.
how I saw them,
Bad
was on the
Religion.
Warped Tour.
Yeah, but we had to listen to
too.
these guys
Me
in
too.
record stores. We'd go in the record store and say, "Who is that? Could you play that?" You know, you couldn't hear it on British radio, which is way more restricted than you guys in terms of numbers of channels, and because the BBC were, I mean, they wanted to appear hip, so they eventually got with the program. But for a while, it was like, "No, we're not playing that. We're not playing that stuff. It's not ABBA or Cliff Richard, you know." Well, Cliff was a punk.
But you
So
still
that
have
was-
pirate radio going on.
And there was pirate radio, but, you know, you created your own underground scenes. You know, we had parties we just played stuff at. So, and of course the Ramones. I mean, I have an enduring love for the Ramones. Just one of
I
the
saw them twice.
yeah.
Pizza Joey.
Yeah, I was very fortunate. I got to see Joey perform right before he died.
I did too.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Again,
it's
it was
such a
during the Warped
shame.
Tour. He was managing a band, and he came on stage, and they played "I Want to Be Sedated," which was fantastic.
I got that one.
Oh, I hate you. I hate you so much.
Oh,
It was the one and only
1980.
time.
I got you
1980.
beat by a couple years, but
Lucky.
I don't know if I still have the ticket.
Yeah, I've lost most of mine, but because they got lost on the night. Things were pretty fraught at these days.
I was like 6 in 1980. There's like no way I would have seen them live.
I know. Well, yes, but at least you managed to see Joey before he passed
Yeah.
away. In fact, they're all aren't they all gone? The drummer was the drummer Marky. Is it still alive? Or-
Yeah, Marky, I think is still alive.
Yeah.
I actually, he showed up. I'm in a photo with him, which was pretty cool. But he did Alamo City Comic Con, so I had a chance to meet him. I thought that was pretty fucking cool.
I got to meet Dee Dee
ooh.
at a really small bar on South Street, which was pretty cool.
I just want to.
But when I
invite
saw the
another-
Ramones, they just played larger places, like in the early '90s, I should say.
Just a quick invite under the panel for another man who actually we've had some good conversations offline about punk because he's quite into that era. It's Captain Courtney Spock.
Hello.
Yeah, we.
How good is it?
Thanks for coming on, mate. I know you've got some particular memories, and we'll definitely get a chance to cover those. And I think, am I right in saying that at the sort of late 70s period, you would be living in London at the time?
That is correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Great time. I loved ABBA. I mean, punk.
everybody loves ABBA. It's a question
not
of
like
Fuck you, I hate ABBA.
Wow.
No. You secretly love them.
No,
everybody.
I secretly hate them, and I overtly hate them. Publicly.
All the way down.
So
He
your
also- he
your
also
experiences.
clandestinely hates them.
Yeah, actually, there's one or two of the records are quite good, but let's say I have broad tastes, as they actually said to the bishop. So, Captain, you must have seen a few good bands in that era. Then, what was your particular? What were you into particularly?
It really was ABBA. I was a pre-teen when the late 70s, early 80s, but it's just such an explosion. I mean, we're still coming, as you mentioned, coming out of prog rock. Punk was almost the opposite of prog rock, but it did very quickly turn to new wave. And then you got electronic music, Depeche Mode, and then all in between, popular pop music, disco. the birth of hip hop. It was all going on everywhere. Too much creativity. Now we've got fuck all. We just got repeated beats and slaps in the face at the Oscars. Anyway, to be there really. Get gobbed on. It's either gob or
they have some bands that are still kicking. They've got some bands still. I can't believe some of the bands that are still playing. Like the Dickies. They're all in their 60s.
Yeah, a lot of them reformed. I mean, some of them went away for a while, but they reformed. And you're still seeing the Buzzcocks, Stiff Little Fingers, bands like that still play. And why not? Because that's their life, their career, it's their legacy. They should play. I mean, there was a bit of a, punk should burn out and die and not be like the old guys hanging around. But why not? It's music, It's music. They should play. So what? I mean, you must have seen a few of those bands in later years, Captain. Or were you a gig going? No.
I was a gig goer, but no, my early days it was hip hop and then metal. So I didn't, so it was actually, I don't know, I don't apply the phrase too young, but I guess I was just a little bit too young to actually experience punk. I started buying records about 13, so that would have been the early 80s in hip hop. So
by that time,
I was young, I was aware of it. I was old enough to be aware of it on top of the pops. It looked very dangerous.
Yeah, by that time, a lot of those bands had morphed into or inspired what we probably call new wave, the Jam and the Police and so on. And then you mentioned the electronic stuff, and then of course it spawned a lot of things like the Depeche Modes, New Order, who'd come out of Joy Division.
Spawned so many things. And even punk at the time, I like the idea that the Stranglers, they're like, oh, that's not real punk for the punk hipsters. They've got an organ player. They've got what their keyboard. One of their members is over 30. They're not punk. What are you, the fucking punk police?
Well,
punk
it's funny. I was going to touch on that because when you look, I've got a picture of them, and they do look a little older than your average punk band. But they're probably the only punk band with a Hammond organ.
Yeah, so in hindsight, my favourite punk band is the Stranglers from the point of view, no more heroes anymore. And they went on Dutch TV, it's on YouTube, and they swapped places. I've never seen the Beatles do that. They swapped, they had the keyboardist playing the guitar because they were miming. They didn't care. That's punk madness.
Hang on.
The Stranglers. Isn't that Ezra Miller's favorite punk band?
Ezra Miller's.
Oh,
that's a good one. Hang on, I got to try and share this picture with you. So yeah, here they are. Now, if you look at Dave Greenfield, it's Dave Greenfield, isn't it, or is it Greenslade? Greenslade was a band. This is Dave Greenfield. He looks suspiciously prog to me with his long hair and tash,
But there's in the context of being a punk band, he's being a rebel because he's like with the Sex Pistols, going out with your handkerchief on your head. Because a lot of punks would be like, "I'm being a real punk. I've got a leather jacket and a swastika, gobby." And so to be dressed as a prog rocker in a punk band, that's dangerous. He's the rebel.
Yeah. And I think if they ever got any stick, they just kicked the shit out of them anyway, so it didn't really matter. But They came out of the pub rock scene. They were playing in sort of 72, 73 in pubs. The Dagenham Stranglers, I think they first called themselves. And then they were secretly good musicians. So they had to
But don't tell anyone.
Don't tell anyone. They toned it down a bit at first, but when they got into their later material, you saw how good musicians they were. I loved Jean-Jacques Brunel there, the Barracuda bass. That deep rumbling bass he had, it was brilliant, almost like a lead instrument. And then, as Hugh Cornwell used to describe him on stage, introduced him as the demon of the seamen. So whatever he meant by that, I don't know. And then he always jokes about Dave and his organ, a man who knows a way around his organ.
Maybe it was the porn stash.
Yeah, so you get the porn stash. So I think they were a band that were a little more into the sex. They were at the sexual innuendo end of the punk movement, I believe. So, but yeah,
speaking of innuendos, our friend, the captain of the Dix Division, has to go. Get ready for his show tonight.
Yeah,
sorry,
sadly, I got to bounce, and I got a lot of work I need to do over here at the range.
Let me solo you. I'm going to
I appreciate you having me on, man. Fucking love talking about punk rock.
Oh, great. Well, we'll do it again. We'll have a round two because we never get through all the stuff in one show. So this is the first punk one we've done. We'll do a round two, and I do appreciate you joining me, mate. Thank you very much.
All right, man. Thanks a lot.
I'll
Take
see
care,
you
guys.
later.
You take care. I'll see you later on,
Bye.
yeah?
Bye.
Ciao.
Cheers,
Yep.
buddy.
See you later, comics.
Right, that's it. We're done. No, I'm just kidding. Just kidding. Yeah, Stranglers. And earlier in my montage of photos, I'd covered The Damned, of course. Now, The Damned, another one of my favourite bands, possibly the first punk single ever with New Rose. They give it the distinction of the first one. There's an argument about whether the Vibrators beat them, but they're in my punks or posers section, so I'm not going to count them.
Vibrators are great.
I know,
I
but
love the
you know,
Vibrators.
Gary Tibbs of the Vibrators went on to be in Roxy Music, playing all that lounge stuff with Brian Ferry. So he made a better living, but wasn't punk. But yeah, The Damned, a great band, and again a band that hid their musicality under a veneer of, you know, smashing
They were
things
entertainment too.
Yeah.
Captain Sensible, like they're
So,
I love him. The bass
Captain
player.
Sensible, the bass player, and then now guitarist in The Damned. He switched instruments a few times. He had a #1 hit single in Britain with Happy Talk from South Pacific.
Oh.
Captain, you'll remember that.
Happy
Happy
talking,
talk about things we like to do.
I was like, that Captain Sensible, he's in The Damned. They didn't even believe me. I was like, yeah, he was on the Young Ones last night. Captain Sensible, one of my favourite captains. He's in The Damned.
Yeah, so he had this great hit with Happy Talk, not a punk element to it. It was just pure, you know, he did the thing straight. It was great. Yeah, who knew, you know? But anyway, he's still in The Damned, playing guitar now. But they Smash It Up, I'm going to talk about later. That's a great record. And it's actually almost proggy at the beginning, and then goes into the heavier bit.
Smash it up.
Yeah. The Buzzcocks we talked about. These are just some of the bands that I was into at that time and really got into. So Susie and the Banshees.
Susie.
Yeah, and so the women were represented.
I got to meet Susie.
Yeah.
I got to see her and Budgie. Susie and Budgie at Newbury Comics in Boston when I lived in Boston. They were doing like a signing. It was pretty cool.
Cool. So Susie shows that there were women, and she was part of the Bromley contingent with the Pistols. In fact, we'll see her later in a little clip. But she shows that there were women just as heavily involved in the scene as the guys. I felt a little bit sorry for her because her and Budgie, they were on tour of The Cure with a support act, or the other way around, and the other two members of the band left. They just left the tour and left them high and dry. So Robert Smith of The Cure played all the guitar parts for them live, but the band abandoned them, the two of them. But that was a bit weird. Still no explanation. I guess they just fell out. But Susie was great, yeah. And like a lot of these bands, she ends up doing covers of things like Dear Prudence and having hits with it, Beatles stuff. You know, they showed their roots. But more women, of course. X-Ray Specs, Polystyrene, another Bromley contingent girl, but they had a couple of good hits and were on TV quite a bit, Old Grey Whistle Test, whatever. But my favourite punk girl band of the time, the Slits. No idea what the name means. I mean, I had no idea what they're talking about. But the Slits were...
themselves the Splits, and it was a typo.
That's right. They did the Splits, but I've got another picture of them with one of their album covers, and they're basically naked but with mud all over them. I'm not sure I can show it, but it's really good. But they got a lot of flack at the time for it because they were, oh, you're selling your bodies, and they just said, oh, fuck you. But funnily enough, one of their mothers married John Lydon, is still married to him today. One of the mothers of one of these girls. So, isn't that weird? Didn't marry one of them. He married the mother. So, Stiff Little Fingers, Northern Irish band, regional, showing it wasn't all London. There was stuff going out in the province. Buzzcocks were from Manchester, of course.
Wait, Stiff Little Fingers?
Yeah.
Did they ever go with the Slits?
They should have gone with two of the Slits, and then the Buzzcocks could have joined in too. But funny that punk wasn't really that sexual, and yet you had all these sexual innuendos in the band names. But
that is weird because that's even a quote, isn't it? Punk isn't sexual; it's just aggression.
That's right. And as Johnny Rotten once famously said, love is 3 minutes of squelching noises. So, but they were Stiff Little Fingers. That possibly the loudest concert I've ever been to was Stiff Little Fingers. I got the ticket here. Wolverhampton Civic Hall, April 28th, 1980. Loud, so loud it was painful. And I liked loud gigs. This one was like, I had to go and stand at the back instead of in the front. It was so painful. They were loud. Good though. And then I think the last one in this grouping would be a Scottish band called the Rezillos, which Courtney has disappeared, but she knows them very well. And then later on became the Revillos. For some reason, changed one letter in their name. Again, they had a female lead. They were a lot of fun. Saw them a couple of times. So punk was all over the place in Britain, not just in London. London.
That London.
But London had the good stuff. You could see guys in London like the Stranglers and Ian Dury, and then all the ska bands which came out of the British punk, the Specials, Madness, stuff like that.
This town is coming like a ghost town.
And that's when it got more political, I think, in Britain, when that stuff happened.
Yeah. No more fighting. Dance floor.
Courtney's back. Now, the Specials...
Can I comment really quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
Just going back to the Stiff Little Fingers and to the Rezillos, because I heard it as I was rebooting. I'm sorry I keep getting kicked off. The Rezillos did a cover, first of all, Top of the Pops, didn't they? That's the song I remember from them. And Stiff Little Fingers, that was the last band that I did get to see. And actually, this band is an LA punk band, the band I'm wearing, with a female singer, male, but the Avengers. They were,
you mentioned
they
them,
represented the females in the
great television
in the LA
show.
punk scene. yeah. But they opened up for Stiff Little Fingers in October of 2019. I'd seen them a bunch of times before, but yeah, great band. Yes.
Great venue, Wolverhampton Civic Hall, great venue. I saw so many good gigs there. I saw the Scorpions there. This is a place that's like 400 people in it, 300 people. Scorpions were huge. Saw them right. It was the sweatiest gig I've ever been to in my life. I lost about 20 pounds and I wasn't that heavy in the first place. So. But yeah, sorry I keep flashing these tickets at you. These are the only ones I've got left. I lost most of them, but let's go back to the...
If you talk about the British scene, going back to that, and you were talking about the female presence, with Susie and the Banshees and stuff. Does anyone remember Vice Squad? Becky Bondage. She was a big...
Oh, Becky Bondage, yeah. No, you're right. I remember that.
She was a big female. And then they had They had X-Ray Specs.
Well, X-Ray Specs I had a picture up of earlier, which...
Polystyrene, yeah. I was just trying to think the female
Polystyrene. She was very fake. Polystyrene. I love the names. I love the names. Rat Scabies, the drummer and the Damned. What a great name. But yeah, that's more of the sort of the British stuff. We were looking at the American stuff too earlier.
American stuff that kind of wasn't mentioned was you were talking about like East Coast versus West Coast, but more of the kind of I don't know even what style of punk, but like one of my favorite punk bands of all time are the Dead Boys, and they were around. They formed in '75, but they were around I think '75 like to '80. They broke up. Stiv Bators, Lords of the New Church. But
I should have actually. I didn't really. I was looking at limited time to bring pictures and stuff together, and I did think about them, and because I'm working long shifts right now, so I ran out of time. But yeah, they were definitely fairly well known on the scene in Britain too, the Dead Boys. So, but yeah, so I had a few other American clips just to show you. There was the whole CBGB scene, of course, with Blondie. CBGBs.
I've been there quite a bunch.
Yeah, I know you have, but yeah, that scene was the big New York scene, and it didn't take long. I think. I mean, Blondie, it didn't take them long to kind of turn into a more conventional sort of new wave pop band. They started out pretty punky, but and then the Dead Kennedys. Somewhere the band is in there.
But this was the tip. Was very out.
Don't forget to pack a wife. Boom, boom, boom.
Yeah, that's right. But this is the kind of gig you would get. I mean, I've been in a few of these. I was probably standing further to the back, though. It's a little guy. Didn't want to get stomped on.
Oh, not me.
Yeah, gigs like that were fun, you know? Until things
Interesting
went
name
awry.
for a band. Do you think it was a reference to Star Wars and Disney Lucasfilm?
I think so. I think it was like an early Kathleen Kennedy diss.
They were really ahead of the curve, weren't they?
Yeah. So, no, this is actually the Dickies. This is what they look like today, the Dickies. That was meant to be a joke, but I tried, you know, tried to lighten the mood.
It's like, yeah, no.
Dickies are stronger and Dickies wear longer.
That fiddle player looks like he might still be alive.
Yeah. Well, this is the Dickies today. Yeah. But no, that's the Dickies. So, as I say, I had a ticket to see them and the gig got cancelled, so I never ended up seeing them ever.
They're really good live.
Yeah. And then another band that I'm quite into is Television, who, again, morphed pretty quickly into a more angular, spiky form of new wave. But Marquee Moon, their first album, is really good. And they were on that New York scene as well.
I got to see Television in the later years.
Yeah. Pretty good stuff. And then, but again, very artsy. That was the New York thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then you had Johnny Thunders, of course, still on the scene in that era. Johnny Thunder and the Heartbreakers. I wonder if Tom Petty ever sued him.
No.
Or was it the other way around?
He's an American girl.
Their song, when they did Can't Put Your Arms Around a Memory, that's like a great.
Yeah.
I think it's a cover maybe, but that's a great song.
And then another band that was quite fond of was Black Flag. This was before our famous riot that they happened to them. This was I think they were a San Francisco band, weren't they? So again, the difference between the Californian stuff and the New York stuff. California
Also,
stuff was much.
Bay Area San Francisco band is a band called Fang. I actually sent that picture to your Discord.
Wow, I know.
And speaking of Green Day that we were talking about earlier, Green Day actually covered a song by Fang, and also Nirvana did, Mudhoney did, Butthole Surfers, and Metallica.
I think Fang covered a Guns N' Roses. No, Guns N' Roses covered a Fang song at one point.
Extended version or something.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Guns N' Roses covered one of the songs.
Yeah,
and
Fang is the band that I got to fill in for.
Cool. But yeah, that's
the Money Will Roll Right In. That's what they all covered.
Yeah, so these were kind of the to me some of the seminal early American punk bands.
And John Doe. He's a big actor.
Yeah, quite tall.
Yeah, John Doe became a big actor. He's in a lot of movies.
Yeah.
There's a.
That's X-Ray Specs. So
yeah,
these are.
Is that who that is?
This is X-Ray Specs again. So.
Or X-Ray Specs. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, that's okay. So I'm just closing all these images. So I have a little. Time are we on? How far are we in? Let's check in on the chat. I'm sorry, chat. I've kind of been ignoring you a little bit. I have been kind of watching you, but there's a lot of manipulation of media going on here. So, what do we got? So the commander has been very active in the chat. Thank you, sir. He's a big music man. We'll have to get you on here one of these days, Commander, and we can talk about that and UFO. Dead Kennedys. Yeah, Dead Kennedys were a lot of fun. I loved the way they just basically just stuck their finger up like Holiday in Cambodia. Come on, you can't get better than that.
Yeah, ethnic jazz has so much snares and stereo. Anyway,
that's the one. The Plasmatics, yeah, Wendy Williams. That was Butcher Baby. Wasn't that the big hit? Butcher Baby. But yeah, that was good stuff.
Butcher Baby, work on, I'll take them away, or something like that.
Yeah. Technically, it's not
something else.
If you like Cambodia, I recommend the Richard Cheese jazz lounge.
Oh God, I love lounge versions of things. I'm gonna have to listen to
You're
that.
You're gonna love Cheese.
So Susie Quattro, I have a lot of love for, and in fact, I have a lot of love for her original garage band, the Pleasure Seekers. If you've ever heard them, and seen some of their album or singles covers, The Pleasure Seekers.
Window.
Yes. So the Pleasure Seekers, you could probably get arrested at my age for looking at their single covers, but that was Susie Quattro's early days. I'm not sure I should have been.
At a certain age, do we have to stop being horny? What?
Yeah, I mean, it just I don't believe so, but they were pretty young and pretty scantily dressed. Good band though.
Bit of lingerie goes away. Just ask Courtney Love.
Yeah. Well,
Not you,
like Courtney, a great bass player. So
exactly.
Well, you know, R. Kelly told me age ain't nothing but a number.
Yeah.
Oh, no, it doesn't work the other way.
Too soon.
So Legalize, my friend. Are you any of the bands and acts that we've shown, or any of those in your wheelhouse?
So, you know, it wasn't a small town per se where I grew up, but it was kind of musically isolated. We had, you know, album-oriented rock and top 40 rock and pop coming out of Philly, and we had the college radio station. But I'll be honest, it was like out of the 24-hour day, like it seemed like 18 of it was scheduled to play jazz, and not good jazz, just kind of the stuff that puts you to sleep. And so really it was word of mouth was the only way that you heard about stuff. And although we had a record store in town that was, and we had a couple record stores that were well stocked, it was the kind of place where, you know, if you walked in and asked for it, they could show it to you, but you weren't gonna just hear it being played, punk stuff. They, you know, and even then, if you walked in and asked for it, they might have to order it from Philly or New York or whatever. So a lot of this stuff for me is like, you know, I kind of heard of some of these bands, but I've just heard their name. I've not heard any of their actual music. For me, I went from, you know, 70s album-oriented rock exposure straight into new wave. I just kind of skipped the whole punk thing in between, with the exception of a few things.
Well, new wave was easier and more accessible to get, but then you had bands like the Police and the Jam, and you know, the stuff that the Captain was talking about earlier. So it was on the radio. It was on MTV. MTV had hit by then, so it was easier to get.
Well, a lot of that stuff was on MTV in my area long before it ever got on the radio.
You know, the early 1980s, MTV used to play music videos. That's
Who knew?
MTV was creating trends, not reacting to them at that point. MTV they were desperate for music video content, so that any band that had a music video would get played, which I think a lot of bands used it to their advantage. But it also meant you were exposed to a lot of music that you weren't going to hear otherwise.
It's true, and I used to enjoy it. I mean, I just stick it on and leave it on all day, and you could drop into it, and it was quite good. I mean, there was some really clever stuff in those days. I still don't think you saw a great deal of punk on it, though. I think a lot of these bands predated that.
Videos.
Yeah, I mean, they did later. The Stranglers had quite a few good videos that were on MTV, and one or two of these other ones. But some of them had kind of gone by the wayside by then. But actually, I don't know if you...
Clips out of Rock and Roll High School would get played.
Yeah. Yeah, the Ramones were still making videos and having hits. It kind of tailed off in the mid-'80s a little bit for them, but when Rock and Roll High School was out, they were probably at their commercial peak, I would think. So I wanted to just give you all a break and play this little top 5 Sex Pistols moments video that I've put together. Again, hopefully not too much music in it that'll get me copyright struck, but these are not so much about the records. This is about the Sex Pistols. You gotta see, in Britain were a phenomenon, not so much because of the music, although I love the music, but because of the publicity storm that went around them.
Yeah.
So they were thrust into the public consciousness in such a way that, as the Captain will know, you couldn't not hear about them, even if you couldn't hear their music or see them on television.
It was like that. It was like a shot from the Death Star. They were very different in feel from Star Wars, but the same level of sudden cultural impact.
all of a sudden, everyone went from knowing nothing about these guys to them being as well known as the Beatles. Like in every newspaper front page, every television news and opinion show, and it was most of it wasn't about the music. It might be about the titles.
It was that Bill Grundy interview, wasn't it? The film from the Fury, front page of the Sun, using four-letter words.
We are going to get to that. So if you just give me 1 second, we will be there. So I've put together this little video of. Hang on, I gotta just minimize this. Sorry, I'm manipulating my screens. See, this is why I need a producer. Toxic's away doing something. So
a real producer.
A real producer.
Yeah, what?
Not an executive producer.
Not an executive producer, right? So we're going to share this.
I don't pay attention.
No, I mean, I can't pay you. Well, I can give you some, vouchers for A&W.
Oh, you can pay me. Oh yeah.
So here's my little top
So
five.
toxic.
Top 5 Sex Pistols moments, some of which we've mentioned already. I'm
right now,
I'm hoping this will play okay. So here we go. And I'll press play. Can we hear it?
I don't hear anything.
No. Typical. We'll start that again. I did tick the little button that said play.
I do it just silently. Welcome to the 1923 Pogo Dancing Championship. There goes Billy Bunter at the front. He's really jumping around there like a fool.
That's right. There's me getting the shit kicked out of me. Oh, no, wrong video. Sorry. No, that's it. Can you hear it now? Can you hear it?
Yeah.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated? Good night.
You've been described, or I think one of you has said
This is
you're a
my
group that's
opening
unmanageable.
montage.
Do you really feel that way about yourselves, that you're maybe unmanageable in the sense of being, forgive me, out of control?
Come back to the Pistols one.
We have a manager. We have a manager.
How's he doing?
He's doing.
We've had him before as well.
We've had him before.
What do you do?
What do I do?
What do you guys do all day?
Nothing.
But punk is an answer to all the glitter and the stuff that costs a lot of money. that you couldn't afford.
Punk is just a rebellious rock for all kids.
is a punk rocker. Honestly, whenever anything explodes in this house, it's always blame Vivian.
That was for the captain. I wasn't
the
intending.
young ones.
Yes, I wasn't intending to share that particular one. My apologies. I was going to share something different, but somebody might not have seen that. That was my opening montage. Because we need a montage. This time I will share my Sex Pistols one. So, Vivian. I tried to find the one where he headbutted people, but I couldn't find it. Right, my top 5 Sex Pistols moments put together at extreme lassitude. So, number 5, I believe, in my exciting Sex Pistols moments, the night that Pete Townsend met Paul Cook and Steve Jones. I think Legalize, you'll know about this one. Pete was already drunk after hours of financial haggling over Who band business, and he kind of half recognised Cook and Jones in some club in London. Knew them in the Sex Pistols. He actually thought one of them was Johnny Rotten, because he was so drunk already. But when they corrected them, he got really confused and embarrassed, and he made tons of abject apologies for being a rock dinosaur and urged the Pistols to take over from the Who and save rock and roll by finishing the job they'd started and killing it off or whatever. But Cook and Jones actually were thrilled to meet him because they loved the Who, one of the bands, classic rock bands they loved, and they were horrified when he said that the Who were going to break up because they were finished and washed up, and they declared their love of the Who. In fact, the Pistols did have Substitute in the live set. But that evening finished with the drunken Pete Townsend sleeping in a Soho doorway and thus inspired the Who classic "Who Are You," which was written about this night. But yeah, they loved the Who.
It's very interesting.
Alcohol's a hell of a drug.
That's right. So it was one classic rock band they were willing to give a pass to. And funnily enough, they spent some time as well with another classic, another punk alumni, Pete. And there's Pete with Mick Jones.
Did the Sex Pistols ever comment on Led Zeppelin?
Not to my knowledge, but if they did, it probably wouldn't be favourably.
A jolly good bunch of lads. I wish the guitar solos were a bit longer.
That's right, yes. And I like the Hammond organ of John Paul Jones. Well, here, I've got a Clash story. Totally nothing to do with this. Mick Jones of the Clash once met Mick Jones of Foreigner, who the guy founded Foreigner. And they were chatting away, and Mick Jones says to Mick Jones of the Clash says to Mick Jones of Foreigner, "I wish I had your royalties." Because Mick Jones of Foreigners made a lot more money.
That's great.
But, yeah, because they always the name got confused in the press a lot, even though they're very different. So number 4, "God Save the Queen" reaches number 1 in the British charts.
Controversial to this.
Or does it, Captain? Or does it?
I say, I'm so glad it did, but they still won't admit it.
Yeah. So released on, so "God Save the Queen," the single, was released on the 27th of May 1977 on Virgin Records. This was the third time round for this record because EMI had signed them, recorded it, and then dumped them within a week. A&M had signed it, pressed 20,000 copies of the single, dumped the band, and virtually scrapped all of those. It's one of the most collectible records ever in history. If you can find a copy of "God Save the Queen" on A&M Records, it's worth a fortune. But anyway, they released it on Virgin eventually. This powerful slab of noise excoriating the British monarchy, that's a good word for you, was instantly banned.
Do you have it?
I don't have an A&M "God Save the Queen." If I did, I'd have a producer.
God Save the Queen.
The fascist regime. And there's so the BBC
dreaming.
The BBC banned it immediately. No rare airplay, no television. And they're supposedly independent local radio competitors like ITN and so on, they banned it as well. Because it was the Queen's Silver Jubilee, you see. And I mentioned Virgin because they Richard Branson, to his credit, took the Pistols on when 2 other labels had dropped them. But despite that total...
So wait a minute. BBC can play nudity, but they can't play "God Save the Queen"?
That is correct. The BBC is and always has been the British establishment, you see. So anyway, despite this almost total ban, the single sold out everywhere. And the powers that be, they decided the record couldn't be allowed to top the charts, though. Like, it couldn't be allowed to be number 1 in the singles chart. So as a result, the official BBC chart showed them only at number 2. Behind Rod Stewart's thrusting song of rebellion, "I Don't Want to Talk About It." Actually, I like that song. It was originally done by Crazy Horse, Neil Young's backing band, but that's a different story. But anyway, so there you can see
with Barbra Streisand. It's so funny that they're
what a wonderful chart. You can see why punk became popular.
Yeah.
You know, I believe that counts as a conspiracy.
Oh,
That's right. Sandwiched between Rod Stewart and Kenny Rogers, and with Barbra Streisand bringing up the rear, so to speak. I'm quite keen on the Jacksons. That one's okay. And the Shuffle, Van McCoy. I was a big fan of 10cc. They're at number 9. But you can see what they were dealing with. So the chart was manipulated. Everyone's convinced it was manipulated. First of all, for 1 week only, the BBC said, we're not counting record sales from record companies that own their own stores, aka Virgin Megastores, who sold tons of records, not just their own, for 1 week only. So they didn't count the Virgin sales, which was like half of the record stores in the country. This is the kind of shit they pulled. When they did Top
Yeah.
of the Pops, they just skipped over it. And number 2, we're not going to talk about that. And some charts even blanked the name completely.
That's the beautiful thing, because then, I mean, and we're still talking about it 45 years later. Basically, we caught them trying to suppress the, well, in this case, the Sex Pistols. Once you catch that all the way up to the top of the government, once you catch them doing suppression, I was still fresh out of Poland at that point. I was like, oh, here we fucking go again. So it's and now look where we are. See, that's right there. That's the seeds of today's world. The kids are rebelling, and the government they're treading on the kids. We are the flowers in your dustbin, ma'am.
Yeah, well said, Captain. Well said. That's what it was all
And it's
about.
the Streisand effect.
Absolutely. Literally the Streisand effect.
Mm-hmm. Yep, trying to suppress it only made it more popular.
So if Barbara hadn't been in that chart...
So bad.
Tell everyone, the government lied about the Sex Pistols. Sorry, Rod Stewart, that ain't happening. Not on my watch.
I'd just like to say a hail to Polly, Latino Slant. Thanks for coming in to watch, man. Hey, you can join the show if you want. Let me know. We can send
Orale.
So anyway, Virgin themselves stated at the time that they were convinced the song had made number 1, and they had the sales receipts to prove it because of the sales they'd made. And they were sold out. You couldn't buy a copy of the record, and they know how many they'd made. And years later, the BBC did tacitly admit that they had rigged the chart to preserve the Queen's dignity, you see. But for one glorious week, the entire British establishment shit themselves over a little 7-inch piece of plastic. And it was fucking glorious. And to this day, it's still a glorious slab of noise. The Pistols, I love the Pistols songs because, unlike a lot of punk stuff, it was fairly thin in production-wise. This one was a meaty slab of power, Chris Thomas produced it, so he had a great record. He started with the Beatles and White Album and stuff like that. So
you don't think big tech would ever pull anything like that in the modern day, do you?
Never. They would never hide something they didn't like and shadow ban it and download it and cheat. Who cheats on polls? I mean, come on, nobody cheats on polls. I trust the polls. Well, not that I don't mean the Polish people. I'm not talking about the Polish people, of course, Captain. Anyway, to move on to my number 3 Sex Pistols memory moment, whatever you want to call it. After my zooming in on that chart, which took me ages to figure out. This one was Lemmy giving Sid Vicious bass lessons. So Sid Vicious,
amazing.
Well, after Glenn Matlock, the bass player, was fired from the Sex Pistols, supposedly for liking the Beatles. Well, he actually did like the Beatles, but that wasn't why he was fired. But they used that in the press. And Glenn's a very capable player. I mean, went on to be in the Rich Kids with Midge Ure, great Scottish artist. But the band then turned to their old chum who hung out in the club, Sid Vicious, to replace him, despite Sid having something like less than 0 capability on any instrument. But he'd made the attempt. He was making the attempt to learn, and he learned from none other than the legendary Lemmy of Motorhead, because Sid lived in Lemmy's flat for a while in London. So, to quote Lemmy, and I can't do his voice properly, Johnny Rotten used to go and see Hawkwind play when Lemmy was in Hawkwind. I remember him turning up in his long hair and a greatcoat at London gigs. Sid Vicious lived in my flat for a couple of months, and I tried to teach him bass, but he was hopeless. And one day he came rushing into the flat all excited saying, "Lemmy, I got the job with the Sex Pistols." And I said, "Great, are you part of the road crew?" And I laughed when he told me he was playing bass. "You can't even play the bass, you're fucking hopeless." So even Lemmy couldn't teach him. But what I want to know is, what kind of neighbours did they have in this flat? And what did they think of what was going on? That's right.
They weren't deaf at the start, they were deaf at the end.
That's right. Imagine living next to Lemmy and Sid Vicious. I mean, I hate to think of the state of that flat inside. I mean, doesn't bear thinking about for those of a hygienic persuasion. I'm surprised they
Just
could get
imagine
the
some
dough.
little old lady.
They'd probably be comparing swastika collection.
I mean, just imagine it. It's carving swastikas into each other. It's like 400 bottles of whiskey and beer cans lying around. And I don't know. I hate to think of it. Imagine if they said, we're having a party, and after the end of the party, they said, do you want to sleep here for the night? No, I think I'll just walk 20 miles home. It's okay. Anyway, so that was Sid's vain attempt to learn how to play an instrument. At number 2, the Sex Pistols go sailing. And this is a really good one. So anyway, on June the 7th, 1977, Malcolm McLaren, who was a great promoter, and I actually like some of the records he made after that, Buffalo Girls, stuff like that. He was quite a good record producer.
Buffalo Girls go around the outside, round the outside.
That's the one. So June 7th, 1977, Malcolm McLaren lined up a boat trip, promotional event to mark the launch of God Save the Queen. And it was a cruise down the River Thames through central London on a boat named the Queen Elizabeth. See what he did there? So the Pistols and a bunch of their pals, who included people like Jordan, who was on the scene, Ja Wobble, Public Image Limited, later Palmolive, Vivienne Westwood's, Richard Branson was on it. Yeah, they were all on this boat. Set sail about 6:30 p.m. As it was getting dark, they started playing a set. And you see them playing, out in the top of the boat as they're going through. And the booze was really flowing, amongst other things, probably. The live set, just as they passed the Houses of Parliament, they played Anarchy in the UK.
Oh.
Now, how fucking good is that? I mean, come on. But then things started to go a little wrong. A little awry, shall we say. And the trip ended in chaos. So lots of people were complaining. The authorities were not pleased about this. So the police launches forced the boat to dock. And McLaren, Westwood and others were arrested. Although the band themselves
you've been trapped.
managed to escape. This is on the boat.
So as soon as you drive, the license to this premises wants you off, so please leave now before there's any further trouble.
The reason you're here is because it's the Sex Pistols. If it wasn't the Sex Pistols, there'd be no interest in this boat tonight.
There's Vivienne Westwood, Malcolm McLaren getting dragged away. Vivienne Westwood was arrested as well. So the band didn't get arrested. I'm not sure why, but the police intervened just to save face for the establishment. However, if Malcolm McLaren's aim was to get maximum publicity, once again he succeeded because this was front page news, and I think it was hilarious. Plain anarchy. But anyway, at number 1, we've mentioned it earlier, the Pistols' infamous Bill Grundy show appearance.
Yes.
Which possibly more than anything else made national headlines in history. Sharper-eyed people here may spot a certain Susie Sue standing up in the corner. But so December 1st, 1976, it's got to be one of the biggest miscalculations in television history. The Pistols and their entourage were invited onto this show, which was on London. I didn't see it because it was in London, Thames Television. But, millions of people did. Hosted by a guy called Bill Grundy. Ironically, they were booked to replace Queen, who had dropped out. So the Pistols were booked at the last minute. They were still on EMI at this point, and so were Queen. And whoever did this probably paid with their life, never mind their job, but they booked the Pistols. So both the band and Grundy appear to be a little bit well-oiled. And it wasn't long before things went badly wrong, as we shall see.
Your granddad. Are you worried or are you just enjoying yourself?
Enjoying myself.
Are you?
Yeah.
That's what I thought you were doing.
I always wanted to meet you.
Did you really?
Yeah.
We'll meet afterwards, shall we?
You dirty son. You dirty old man.
Oh, keep going, Chief. Keep going. Go on, you've got another 5 seconds. Say something outrageous.
You dirty bastard.
Go on, again.
You dirty fucker.
What a clever boy.
What a fucking rotter.
Well, that's it.
And the headlines the next day. The filth and the
Filth
fury.
and the fury.
Which, of course, became a name of a movie. But again, there's no such thing as bad publicity. That applied to the Pistols. There's no bad publicity for them because they became famous overnight because of this. But the same
that graphic too.
Yeah, the same didn't apply to Grundy because he lost his job and his career was over after that night. So bad publicity
It's a
can be
bit of
good
a
for some.
tightrope, I must say. You walk it at your peril, but it can pay off handsomely.
Indeed. Well, they didn't care, but Grundy did. Grundy was out after that. So that was my amazing top
Dirty
5
rotter.
Pistols moments, and I hope you all enjoyed those.
Yeah.
I seem to have something. How do I remove this? Sorry, I'm just without a producer. I've got to do this. I need a producer. Ta-da. Have I cut anybody out?
Everyone
We're all
needs a
still here.
producer.
So I don't
We
know
are
about
off
everybody in the
without a
chat.
producer.
If anybody in the chat hadn't seen those before, these are some fantastic moments from Sex Pistols history, and they were. I know everyone talks about the Pistols because it was the biggest punk band, but they were biggest for a reason. They just had the package. They had the attitude. They had the front man. They had the Svengali promoting and promoting them. They had a great producer in the studio for that one album. Never mind the bollocks. They had the songs. Everything just came together. And
Never mind the bollocks, which is where
the
Nirvana
bollocks.
got the idea to name their second album. Never mind.
Yeah. As opposed to
Hey,
Toxic.
Captain, were you just doing a Sonic reducer take on that
Yeah, I think he did.
with the producer? He was okay. I thought I heard that. I was just catching up. I didn't know if that's what you were
See,
saying.
Toxic's favourite album is Never Find the Bollocks.
That's correct.
So did for my North American friends, and you know I love you, Toxic, in the carnal sense as well. But the
Fondle my balls as often as you
in
can.
the biblical sense. So from a North American perspective, did that stuff make it through in there? Did you hear about any of this in 76 and 77?
So it depends on where you were.
I was still in my dad's bollocks in 77.
So he didn't hear anything.
Well, yes. Which father was that, though?
I suppose you would have read about it in like Rolling Stone or other music trade press, but I mean, I never heard Sex Pistols on the radio. I mean, 77, 78, we were drowning in album-oriented rock like Kansas and Styx and Boston. And, you know, it was just like back-to-back Boston and Kansas and Styx over and over and over again. And that's why so many of us were thirsty for new wave, because we were totally tired of that 70s stadium rock.
Yeah. And a part of it was the cost of going to those gigs and the fact you had to line up for 4 hours and it was an arena that you were 500 miles from the stage. And a beer would be then a high price, I don't know, $3 or something. And that was another. It was concert prices were another thing. I mean, I loved going to gigs, but they started to become like £5 to see Status Quo or £10 to see somebody instead of 50 pence. You know.
Once they start doing the stadiums, are they really doing music anymore? I mean, come on,
it's a show.
I mean, the best music I've ever seen is when I've walked into a blues bar to get something to eat, and there was somebody local playing. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason that I listen to outlaw country, Southern rock, Creedence, Leonard Skinner, and Black Flag, okay, and other bands out of Orange County. Why? Because I was just flipping the bird at what was going on at the time in the U.S. It was.
Were you ever into Youth Brigade?
Sorry.
Were you ever into Youth Brigade? Orange County. They're originally Canadians, but.
No, I mean, you hear the stories of what happened at the Cuckoo's Nest, and it just, so you talk about top 5 punk stuff. The Cuckoo's Nest was next to a liquor store, shared a parking lot with a liquor store, a hardware store, and a redneck bar and restaurant. And so you had the punks and the metalheads and the rednecks all thinking they were tougher than each other. And when you read the police reports and stuff from there, the punks always won, right? Because the punks really didn't care. They really thought in the Orange County stuff, that's it. Fuck you. I don't care. I don't care about you. I don't care about this stuff. That's it. Right. And that's the stuff that drew me to that scene. I never got to go see it because by the time I was old enough to get out and travel to these areas, it was all kind of dried up. That kind of experience, right? Because you're not going to get, it's like Woodstock. There was only so many people at Woodstock. There wasn't 600,000, right? So there's people coming, oh, Woodstock, I was there and all this stuff. No, you weren't. There was only a small number of people. So there's only a small number of people that were in the Orange County punk scene, actually in it when it happened. Only a small number of people that were in the LA punk scene actually when it happened. We're looking at these things later. So like the Sex Pistols, I never knew they existed until the movie came out. And
isn't that the case for Toxic for every scene though? The scene is a small number of people that start it. Then it gains some traction and then at some point it goes overground. And it's no longer that scene then, it's something else. It's everybody owns it. Like everyone says, oh, I went to such and such a famous festival. Well, you didn't, You're just saying that now because it's become well known.
Because it's a trendy thing to say, right? And that's why, I come on the show. Have I seen any of these punk bands live? No, I haven't. I have researched and looked at stuff, behind the scenes and watched as much as I can of what's out there. And then what was on the radio I could get to out of the college radio station that I was in, right? And that's the thing. Please, probable, stop that.
I know.
So,
Toxic, it's a band. The Donnas are.
The Donnas are great, and I love the Donnas. And people were talking about the Runaways and Joan Jett. I love that. I actually quite enjoyed
the Runaways and Joan Jett were great.
Joan Jett and the Blackhearts.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and
although she was in a different band beforehand, wasn't she?
Idols.
Yeah. The Runaways movie that was out a few years ago was quite good, I thought. I mean, I know the band didn't like it, but
ding dong.
I know Joan was Joan's a great figure, and I mean that in the musical sense.
She's a major figure in music.
Yeah, there's not many people like her, but she's an original. But the Runaways were great.
Rock, put another dime in the jukebox, baby.
They had their equivalent of Malcolm McLaren with Kim Fowley, of course, who was attempting to be a Svengali manager. I'm not sure he was quite as good as McLaren at it, but they're good stuff.
Yeah.
Lots of these little bands that were kind of half punk or inspired punk or were in certainly an independent scene. It was very independent. You could see these bands in pubs. You could buy. They made cassettes you could buy. You didn't have to go to
If punk was a nuclear bomb, then these bands were within the radius. They were affected by the radiation.
Are they talking about Fall Out Boy?
Oh, nice. Oh, you should have a channel, my friend.
I should.
I think maybe you should do an entire show on One Direction because I think everybody on this panel would love it. Courtney may have just thrown up.
Which direction would that be then?
In my mouth.
6 feet under.
The direction would be the other way from the show because I wouldn't be doing that show. I wouldn't even watch that show myself if I was doing it.
Well, the Monkees, were kind of a band that was made. Well, they were.
The Monkees had the advantage. The advantage of having great songwriters and good session guys and the material was fun. You didn't have to accept it was a band or not a real band or not. The music was quite good for pop music.
Yeah, the
they were
television
more
shows.
Real than Milli Vanilli.
Oh, that's right.
Very true. Very true. I had
That's
that
still
CD.
one of the greatest moments in history when that thing music stopped playing and they were still trying to lip sync. Yeah.
Oh, that was
Gotcha.
get the Grammy back. That was back when news was news.
Yeah.
But I think you do have a parallel in looking back and what was done with the Sex Pistols music and having the British radio stations and television stations owned by the state, and then the fake independent stuff that ITV and all that stuff was. You just they control what you hear, and when I think back to punk and other genres of music that I heard about, it happened when I got to college, and when people started sharing their differences, and so I knew people from Chicago and Dallas and Houston and LA and New York, and I met people from everywhere, and we brought our different music, and we shared that. And I got into a lot of bands at that point that I had never really heard. I had a very oppressive Christian upbringing, and I did. My first album was Village People, because that's the only thing my parents would buy for me until I was able to make my own money and go out and buy my own stuff. Well, they had no idea. They were like, "Oh, look, it's a guy and he's a policeman and he's in the Navy." And I'm sitting there reading the stuff and everything. And in fact, I backwards masked. I still have that album. Yeah. It's a dual album of the live album and their record Sleazy, right? If I backwards mask that, it says that 70s Rocksman is gay. That 70s Rocksman is gay. That's what it says.
Say, your love of the Village People speaks volumes for the way you've turned out as an adult. Well, a semi-adult, I should say.
I would love to see you in the biker outfit. Definitely.
A semi-erect adult, I would say.
Semi-soft.
May I comment on Toxic?
Go ahead.
I wanted to comment on what Toxic Manfly was saying about how he met a lot of people in college, and that's how he kind of learned, the scenes crossed over or whatnot. There were a lot of like zines, and then there was a magazine, but it was made out of like newspaper called Maximum Rock and Roll, and that was kind of like how I got in touch with like a lot of different punks from around the country. They used to have a section in the back of the magazine where people would literally just put like ads for pen pals and stuff like that. And it sounds ridiculous, but we would write letters to each other and send like cassette tapes, mixtapes from local bands and stuff like that. And that was kind of like the old school internet, I guess. Right? Like,
oh, that's cool.
Not internet.
Mm-hmm.
But
well, the college I went to had that.
They had another production called Slug and Lettuce. It was good for that.
Right. Oh, so the college I went to had that music shop, and had all those imports and stuff, and they loved, and they got imports, all of them, and they got them from LA and from New York and stuff. They would fly and do all those things, and you'd go in and they'd be playing some of this stuff, and you'd sit there for a while because you may have been experimenting, let's just call it that, and you'd hear Pink Floyd live albums that you couldn't get in the US, and you would hear underground punk, they would call it, it's what they call it in the mid 80s, coming out of California, and then the punk scene coming out of New York, and the Ramones and all that kind of stuff. And they had billboards and flyers and stuff everywhere. And then they started bringing some of those people in. There's a famous venue in the city I grew up in that still used today to a certain extent to bring bands in of all different kinds. But I count myself very fortunate that I had a great record store very close that I could walk to that had all of that stuff. And
that's a
we had
great
a bunch
point.
of Philly had great record stores.
Record stores were hugely important, and I miss them terribly because there's so few of them now. They were a major component of my life, and it's where you could go and you'd hang out in them all day. It's like people talk about comic stores like that. I did that in record stores, listening to stuff. I worked in a record store. It was just great. You could hear anything you wanted, and ask to hear stuff, and you could get, oh, what's that? I've never seen that before. Especially if I wasn't getting talked about in the mainstream media, you wouldn't see it on TV, but you could hear it in a record store, and it was. I think it's a sad loss to us that we've got so few of them now.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
Well, the best part about hanging out. Oh, sorry.
Oh, just no. They were good communal areas. Yeah, the smell of the vinyl, just the passionate debate. It was in the air. It was essential. But yeah,
that's right. Yeah, it was a community. Yeah, I used to hang out in record stores all day and shoot the shit with people, and that was my nerddom, But Courtney,
I was going to say the other good thing about the record stores is that, well, at least like I used to hang out at this place called Noise Pollution in Philly, which is still there. Is if you knew the owner and you hung out there all the time, they would find the good stuff and hold it behind the counter for you. So you'd come in and feel really special. Like they'd be like, "Look what I got! Look what I found!" It's like, "Oh my gosh!" You know. So that was kind of
that's cool. Legalize,
you kind of wanted to be in with the record stores.
Legalize, you were gonna chip in. No, it's okay.
Yeah. So a band that hasn't been mentioned yet, I guess, because it's not. Might be in the time bracket, but the band Big Black is a band that I only heard of by going into the record store because I think it had gotten like, one song got played on, the new music program on the university or something. And, I was asking the girl that worked there about it, and she's like, "Oh yeah, we got a Hammer Party over here," and pulled out a CD for me.
Yeah, this is what happened at record stores. You could do that. When I worked for a while in a record store as a teenager, it was like heaven because I could then get access to the catalogs and the sheets that would come from the record companies and the distributors and the wholesalers of new releases. And I could say, "Oh, geez, I wouldn't mind hearing that. I'll order a copy of that." The owner wouldn't care. Order a copy of that. Order a copy of that. There you go. And I could get to hear them and then maybe buy them at a discount. And then there was all the freebies. You could get all the promo stuff. It was just brilliant. So, but yeah, that's all. That kind of thing is gone. There's still some secondhand record stores, but the big ones are all gone just about. And I miss them. It's a sad loss, but
it's not the store so much that I miss as if you go into one of those old school kind of record stores, the person behind the counter wasn't just somebody working the cash register. They knew something about music.
Yeah.
And if he said, "I heard this thing, I don't know quite what it was," they probably would know what it is, before you just whistle it into an app and it tells you what song it is or whatever. But on top of that, I mean, for me, many times I would be buying a record, and as I'm checking out, I haven't even asked them any questions or anything. They're like, "Oh, you're buying Magnetic Fields, Jean-Michel Jarre. You probably like this other thing too. Why don't you come and check that out next time you're here?"
Great record.
And I was always buying weird music that wasn't getting played on the radio. It was, except for like, classic rock, just kind of fill the catalog kind of stuff. But I was always buying stuff that I'd heard from a friend of mine. He had the album and I, heard it over at his place, and I go get a copy. And I think it was a little better knowledge populated in my town for the size of my town because it was a university town. So there was people from, all up and down the East Coast that were asking about music and stuff. And the people that I know, the people that ran one of the stores in my town, a store called I Like It Like That. The guy had connections up in Philly. So he was always finding out about stuff that was going on in Philly at Philly record stores.
Yeah, and you'd have every university had a radio station, so you would be hearing stuff in that.
But ours sucked.
Commercial.
Yeah, except for the blues show. The guy had a tremendous personal blues collection and would bring in stuff and play it. But except for that, it was kind of, like I said, it was like 18 hours of jazz every day.
We had a good radio channel.
So you mentioned Jean-Michel Jarre. It's not punk, I know, but I'm a big fan of Jean-Michel Jarre.
And we'll have to talk synth someday.
Yeah, I love that kind of long-form electronic synth stuff. Anyway, yeah, we'll have a show on that alone. I'm
I
sure,
could probably do a show just on Jean-Michel Jarre alone because his career's
and also being a Frenchman, the best French punk star of all time was Plastic Bertrand. Ça plane pour moi. If you've never heard it, great record. It's the only French punk I can think of.
It's the only French punk song I can think of either.
Ça plane pour moi.
Wasn't Daft Punk French?
But they're not really punk, though, aren't they? So.
They're not daft and they're not punk. They are French.
They are French. That's all you need to know.
Boards in Canada aren't from Canada. They're from Sheffield.
That's right. Yes. So that's right. They're too good to be from Canada. So.
Oh, Brian.
I can feel the intruder mob outside my apartment right now. But, the Soul Assassin asked a good question here. So thank you, Soul Assassin, and thank you for watching. You're always watching my shows here. I really appreciate it. Appreciate you all in the chat. You've been really great. I'm watching. I'm sorry I'm not putting as many messages up as I can, but without a producer, this is what happens. An executive producer is not enough.
Hire yourself a producer that actually knows what they're doing. I mean, I'm just a pretty face.
No, you're not even a pretty face. Come on. Don't be hard on yourself.
I'm a communicable disease. That's what I am.
Well, right, scabies, yeah. So, Soul Assassin's question is good, though. Do you think we'll all see a new wave of punk music? Now, I have a view on this, and it's not so much about punk, but I think independent music. That is, music played in smaller venues, produced with smaller labels, or even self-imprints or digital releases by people, bands using YouTube and other things to get their word out, not being signed to major labels because that's tough to do anyway, and they're shit. Just being anti-corporate and getting the word out in the street themselves. I think that is something that is and will come back even more, in my opinion.
Well, I've heard someone make the claim that SoundCloud rap was the new punk rock because it's individuals at home with basic equipment, doing the stuff, and then, they get it out to the listeners directly.
You put it more eloquently than me, but that's, where I was driving at. I think independent...
I'm sure whoever I heard it from put it more eloquently than me.
Yeah.
Well, I think if punk is an attitude, which I think it is, because my point here is that the outlaw country that I listen to in the punk, it has the same attitude, right? It's anti-establishment. I think if you look at someone like a Tom McDonald, who has been massively successful as an independent, who worked forever, do all this stuff, and he still does everything on his own, right? As an independent for there, I think that's the spirit of what punk was. Now, punk is it's
very true. A lot of
it's like we're all individuals
here,
right?
Record labels and stuff.
Exactly, and he's showing a way.
Well,
no, Brian is a giant.
I'm not,
but I mean, we're all individuals. We bring our own musical taste, and we share some of these bands with someone we don't, right? And I think that he's that next wave of what you would quote unquote call punk. He's anti-establishment.
Yep, agreed.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I think the establishment, as we see now, is it goes in cycles, but they've got a real grip now of culture, and that includes music, and the record companies. They've never been more powerful. The handful of major.
They have a grip on mass culture, but the problem is that it was already 15, 20 years ago that mass culture started to break down into individual and niche culture. People don't hear about new music by listening to the radio anymore. They hear about new music because their friend told them about it and sent them a link on Spotify. Now that has had an interesting thing. It means it's a level playing field for new musicians, but it also, the weird thing I notice is all these 20-something kids, they know a lot of music from other decades. That used to not be the case, right? If you were growing up in the 60s, you knew all that 60s music. And then if you were growing up in the 70s, you knew all that 70s music with an overlap of 60s, but a bunch of 60s stuff had already left, and so on and so on. Because you heard about music by listening to the radio, especially if you were not in a major urban area that had its own independent music scene where you could hear stuff that didn't require amplification by, big 3-letter, broadcast networks. But now everything is it's much more word of mouth than it is by, big megaphones.
That's a big deal with a lot of people. I'm kind of like on the cusp of when well, not on the cusp of the internet, but the internet basically made punk especially like completely different, because like people didn't have to, it was work to find like obscure. Sorry, I couldn't think of the word. Obscure punk bands or bands from like another area. Like I remember going to record stores and just like looking through stuff, looking at album covers, you know, which look cool and stuff like that. We didn't have the that like database, you know, right at our fingertips. So they don't have to do the work we had to do now. I'll give into that.
That's right. It was hard to find stuff. Stuff wasn't hard to. It wasn't
Well, the
easy to
preview,
get.
right? The preview of music that gets you right into the music of the stuff, right? So I can go through and I can listen to 20 seconds of, 20, 30 songs in a reasonable amount of time. Whereas if I was in a record store, I'm diving through the records. I got, okay, I like this, how this album cover looks, or I know this band, and then I'd have to get it, and I'd have to find some way to listen to it because they were wrapped. I mean, you break it, you buy it, right? You break that up and you have to take it home, and but how many albums put out? 10, 12 songs, and only 2 of them are worth a crap. There's not too many albums in history where the entire thing is good, end to end.
I disagree 100% because
too.
one of my things that I prepped for this session was a list of bands where their first 2 albums just kill it on every song, and they're all in this time bracket.
Well, that's a good point, and if you want to go ahead and do, want to go ahead and do that list now, mate, that would be perfect.
I mean, yeah, it was just
once everyone else has had their say about the subject at hand.
All right, you let me know when.
Or now. I don't know. Are we done with
Can
that?
I just add one thing about cassette tapes
yes.
versus
it's
like
separate
vinyl?
from
May I
punk.
just
I
add
think
one
that's
thing? With cassette
could do
tapes,
it.
you couldn't even skip.
Yeah, Captain.
I was going to say you could do a 3-hour special just on that. Which are the perfect albums? Because also I think with the advent of digital, once you got iTunes, other brands are available, and you can really, mixtape. Back in the old mixtape, you had to do that in real time. You had to put the vinyl on the thing and put the cassette in. So now I finally realised, when you've got a great album with that one duff track, now you can just fucking delete it. But back in the day, that was an issue. Oh, the perfect album with the one duff track. No,
you could scratch.
Track.
You could scratch the vinyl.
Back to the tape player, to the vinyl. It's the shit track on side B. Gets up.
That's what I always used to do to the George Harrison sitar stuff in Beatles albums. Just skip
that
it.
was the stuff I was there for. Are you kidding?
Oh, yeah.
Well, I could have sent them to you.
Yeah, come for She Loves You and stay for the George Harrison Pretentious Guitar. That's where I am, Sitar City.
Yeah. So
anyway,
that's
Courtney,
a good job. You were saying something,
special.
Courtney?
Is there a perfect album?
I was just going to say that was.
They managed it.
Courtney, please. I'm sorry, Captain.
No, I'm done now.
I was just going to say versus vinyl, like cassette tapes were even harder because you couldn't skip around. So if you bought something on cassette, you had to listen through the whole thing. And you would pull out the insert and read the lyrics. You would know the whole album. Like today, a lot of people don't know the whole albums.
Yeah, 8 tracks were even worse because if you hated the track, it was going to come round again eventually. Just kept going. But,
if you press the wrong button, it would be the next song.
Yeah. So Legalize, my friend. Have you got something to share, or were you just going to go to it verbally?
I wrote a list, and I'll just read it out.
Can we see your notes? No. You get marks for the notes,
I don't. It's not in a digital form.
You get extra marks for the notes.
So like this period from say like let's just bracket it from like 78 to 82 or 83. There was something, and I need to talk to somebody who's like an actual industry historian, and maybe they have a story about what was going on. But there was something going on in the record industry at that time that, the normal, they got 1 or 2 good songs and then there's 8 filler songs. That shit was always there. But there was something going on in the industry at this time that was these acts were appearing, and their first 2 albums, just every song was good. Maybe there was one song that was okay, or 1 or 2 that were just okay, but they weren't bad. And so here's my little list of bands where like their first 2 albums just hit the gate running and just everyone kills it. So Pretenders 1 and 2, B-52's self-titled first album, and Wild Planet. The Police, Outlandos d'Amour and Regatta de Blanc. The beat, or the English beat as we knew them over here, just can't stop it. And what happened? Echo and the Bunnymen, Crocodile, Heaven Up Here. It's not his first album technically, I guess, but Elvis Costello with My Aim Is True and This Year's Model. I mean, something about this period of roughly about 4 years that produces this juggernaut of all these acts that just come out of nowhere and just kill it for like the first couple albums. Maybe they run out of steam after 2. Maybe it's just the pace gets decreased. It certainly doesn't help when your band members die on you, like happened to the Pretenders. But
no, so sad that
so much of this, what we think of as 80s music, is actually coming out in this very narrow window of from about 78 to 83.
Yeah, and do you think that's a cyclical thing? Though I do. I think there's every few years you get that period. Although we may never get it again. That's possible.
There's definitely bands that manage to, they've been working on their material before they got a record deal, and they've been performing it live, and they perfected it, and they've incrementally improved it and tuned it and tweaked it. By the time they get their record deal, the first album just is a blast, and then the second album can take a really long time, and it's nowhere near up to the same standard as the first one, because that first one is the material they've been working on for 10 years until they got their record deal.
An age-old thing, though, the difficult second album. Happens to every genre.
And that's why it impressed me that there were all these bands where it's not just that the first album came out was good, but the second album came out and it wasn't just a rehash of the first one, and it still carried them even higher,
Just
for the Police, I think there's a case to be made that they kind of really had 2 albums of material and got released as 2 singles, or like a double album of material and it got released as 2 single albums. But I'm not a historian on the Police, so I don't really. Those 2 albums just sound really similar.
Pretty far up in them because I was into them very early and saw them early, and I prefer first and third albums to all the others. Second one's
Does the
not
second
too bad.
album feel like the leftover material that didn't make it out
feels
of the
like
first?
the first album again, except for the singles. Having said that, it's got a couple of great tracks in it, but I think the first album was great. I loved the third album, Zenyatta Mondata. After that, I wasn't so keen because they became too stingy. Sting is into jazz.
Too overproduced.
Yeah. It wasn't the Police anymore. It was some other electro pop thing, and some of it was very overrated. Like, I don't like some of the songs. Like, everyone goes on about Every Breath You Take. I'm not that keen on that song. It's played to death.
That's the one that's got the mass pop appeal, which is why everybody talks about it.
The early stuff's far better.
Yeah. So you're not a fan.
He stopped being a rocker.
Tim.
He became an Englishman in New York.
Right.
Yeah, and I'm much keener on the Regatta de Blanc stuff and the more punky stuff, or even the stuff like Bring On the Night and whatever were great live. They were great songs live, especially at festivals for crowd sing-alongs. After that, it became much more produced. But Toxic, I believe you may have to drop out, my friend.
Yeah, I said something in the back in chat, folks, that has got me kicked out. So
that's right.
I like Irish bands.
I really don't
I'm
appreciate you showing that picture of us in that compromising position.
But hey,
I've got far better ones of us in compromising positions. That one was very poor quality.
Yeah, but in my defense, I've got a selfie stick, so it's kind of hard to get that angle right. Yeah, I have to go. Thanks for having me on. This has been a wonderful discussion, and I'm very thankful that you bring on somebody whose musical background is almost opposite of yours. So we both love the Who, but you've known the Who from the beginning, and I just found out about them after a movie. Right, a very American way for finding out some of that stuff if you're not into that kind of thing. And this is one of those as well. I kind of back into punk, but I think it brings a perspective of I can see the outlaw country and the punk having the same attitude. Is it different music? Yes, but it shows musical taste may be different, but we all feel the same things, and we're trying to express those. So I appreciate that very much for you bringing me on. And this is an amazing panel of people that really know their stuff. I have learned a lot from this. And thank you for allowing me to be a part of it.
Well, thanks for joining us, buddy. I really appreciate it. And you're welcome anytime, of course, as you know.
Good stuff.
And,
Thank you so
thanks
much.
for being here.
Toxic,
I
before you
enjoyed
go,
it.
did you ever listen to Dr. Demento?
Of course.
Do you think there's a connection between Dr. Demento and punk?
I think there's a connection to. It's hard to tell because Dr. Demento, after a certain point, became very, very
demented.
Yeah, well, and larger than life. I mean, it's kind of like I've seen multiple bands live after they've already had their heyday, or after and it's different when you see them when they're younger, when they're in the clubs, and when they're playing. And that to me is what punk is. And I think once punk comes out and you're starting to make albums that sell out of it, it loses what punk is to me. I think there's good music. I think that's fine. But it's like outlaw country to me is the same way. Once it got to be too commercialized, then it stopped being that. And that's when you started having all these other offshoots from there. So I just think related, yes, because I think we're all we all generate from the same musical germs, right? And they're just different expressions and stuff from there. But really, no.
So before you go, mate, I'm just going to play you out with something.
What? What?
That's
that guy needs a producer.
That guy needs help. All right, good night.
All right, buddy. See you later.
Good night, Doc.
Bye-bye. Bye. Yeah, and yeah, I think the future is the future bright for anything. I think the future for music could be bright because every so often there is a movement. There was the rock and roll. There was the British invasion. There was rock, like metal and rock, and then there was punk. There's stuff comes around, so you never know. And the tighter their grip, the more systems will slip through. So, Courtney, you got something you want to share? Okay, are you with us, Courtney?
Courtney?
Oh, now I am. Yeah, I'm sorry. Everything was frozen. My internet. It's snowing outside, so we're getting unmuted.
So this is
that was one of the pictures I had. Yeah, that's me in the back right on bass.
That's why I called you the blonde bombshell.
Oh wow,
that is Courtney.
Yeah, that's actually that's in 2005, and that's playing with a band called Fang. They were from the Bay Area, and they were around since at least 80, maybe even before 1980. But they're the band who had the song "The Money Will Roll Right In" that a lot of people covered. And it was like my dream. I'm the only female that ever got to play with them. They needed someone to fill in on bass. And that's 2005 at the Khyber Pass, or they call it the Khyber now, in Philadelphia on Halloween. So, yeah,
I wish I could go back in time and go to that gig, Courtney.
It was a fun time. That's a tiny little venue, too. You could tell by, the stage height. It was a really small place. So.
What bass are you playing there? What is? I can't really see it without my glasses. Yeah.
That was a Fender PB. Oh wait, no, cool. I didn't have my bass. I'm sorry, no, I didn't have a bass. I borrowed someone's bass for that show. Right, yeah. So I don't even remember. That was not my bass. I remember that because something happened where we couldn't get to go pick it up. Yeah, that was just a random bass from another band that I was playing.
That's very cool.
I wasn't
very cool. Cool picture. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. That's really cool. Yeah, I think it's great that you've been in bands and you have that side of the experience, so cool. I like that picture. I like it a lot.
It's definitely fun times. Thank you.
Yeah, no, it's great. Thanks for sharing. So
that's before a lot of people didn't video with their phones, you know what I mean? Even though it was 2005, but a lot of people didn't have the smartphones. I wish there were so many more pictures,
well, that was the difficulty then. Yeah, it was either professional photographers or scratchy 8mm or yeah. So I got a one more thing I want to share. If I can get my executive producer's being no help here. You know who you are.
Well, I got good news. My computer just had Windows installed, so I'll be coming back soon, buddy.
Cool. I'm going to give you full producer rights. I'm just doing, and I can't pay you. All I can offer you is just,
this is payment.
Just to bask in my glory is all I can offer you.
That's another way of putting it, but yeah.
So I wanted to share. I didn't make a video for this because I ran out of time. Just it's kind of like my 5 favorite 70s new punk records. With not counting Pistols and Clash. I've left those out. There's kind of vague rules around this. I don't think any of them are American either, but if I can figure out how to share this damn screen. So one of them would be we've mentioned the band before, the Buzzcocks. And I think you, Courtney, actually mentioned this song. There could have been a number of Buzzcock songs.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's one of my favorite songs of all time.
Ever fallen in love with someone you shouldn't have? It's a slab of power pop.
Ever fall in love with someone you shouldn't have.
That's the one.
I knew he was going to resonate with that one.
I mean, Captain, you really should be doing more karaoke because you're pretty good at that.
Only for punk songs, funnily enough, that don't require any singing talent or voice.
But this to me was although the Buzzcocks were one of the first punk bands, and Manchester band as well, not London, this was more like power pop. What became power pop. It's a slab of tuneful noise, but with a great melody, a great hook. The chorus is very catchy. So, I mean, already things were developing into more of a pop sensibility for some of these guys. I love this record. Susie and the Banshees, Hong Kong Garden.
Oh my goodness.
I would never claim I was the biggest Banshees fan. I do like the first 2 or 3 albums, but this song in particular, which I think was their first single, I may be wrong, absolutely grabs you by the balls from the first second. Brilliant guitar riff. Just that kind of high-pitched guitar chords. Just absolutely killer. Love this record. It's all guitar. It's just the guitar and it's brilliant. So, the Adverts, whatever minor group in the UK punk scene, but this track, I love this track. Gary Gilmore's Eyes. So again, the subject material is not your standard Moon June whatever. It's about a guy who's, if you've never heard it, has Gary Gilmore's eyes transplanted into him after Gilmore is executed because he donates his organs. And he starts to see the things that Gary Gilmore did. So it's a really great slab of fast-paced punk with just this weird lyric about that stuff, I don't know if any of you have ever heard it. I think the Captain might have heard it, but I'm not sure anybody else.
Who? What? Who you? What's happening?
The Adverts. The Adverts, Gary Gilmore's Eyes.
I think I saw an advert for the Adverts, but I skipped it.
It was on YouTube. So anyway, that's another one of my favourites. Give it a listen if you've never heard it. They weren't a huge band, but this was a top 10 hit in Britain. It was really just a very clever record. The Damned, Smash It Up. Of all the Damned tracks, and later on they had some huge hits with things like Eloise and covers of older songs. I love this one, and it's actually got some really, I hate to say it, kind of prog punk leanings, because the opening half of the song is a really nice guitar figure played quite sensitively with some very proggy chord things going on before it then kicks into the heavier stuff. But even that is also more power pop than pure punk. It's a very sophisticated record, and I love it.
I would have guessed there was a little prog on there because the guy on the right is wearing a blazer over a turtleneck.
That's right. These guys are all ex-prog guys that, But yeah, I love...
you got a biker, a vampire, and
Captain Sensible.
And Captain Sensible.
Yeah.
Happy talk. But yeah, this
he used to play Nate in his underwear.
That's right. I love that there's a live performance of The Damned that's on video where they've got a keyboard on stage and they're reading the manual to try and figure out how to play it. Like, how do they take it out of the box? They're going, how do we play this Casio thing here? They got the manual out and they're reading it. And meanwhile, the drummer's still going. But they were some of these bands were a lot more sophisticated than they appeared. Let's put it that way. And then possibly my favorite punk record, even of all of them, the Undertones' Teenage Kicks, which if you've never heard, your life is not complete.
Oh John Peel's favourite record of all time.
That's right. John Peel, who did an awful lot for punk, popularising it on the radio. He played what he wanted, didn't give a shit about the BBC. His show broke all of these bands, but this was his favourite record of all time. And I understand it, because it's just a slab of pure joy.
Yeah.
I love it.
Just the way Fergal. Sorry, Courtney. But yeah, Fergal's Sharky slammed.
Oh, I was just singing in the background.
Vocals.
Yeah, this Fergal Sharkey and he went on to be quite a big solo star. I don't know if you remember that, Captain.
Yeah, he did pop out a little bit.
Yeah, he had a Good Heart was a big hit and stuff like that. Now he's a record company executive. Is hard to find, but he became a big record company A&R guy and executive. I think he married a girl whose father was big in the record company, so he took that route. And the rest of the band kept on playing. But it's just, if you've never, recommend anyone, if they've never heard this song, put it on, and within 5 seconds you will be captured. It's
those teenage kicks all through the
night. With that, the opening guitar chords are just killer. Lovely band. Saw them live.
Wow.
That very well.
Legends.
Oh, you have the ticket.
I have the ticket. And that was 1981.
I don't really believe these are tickets. I think you just printed them on your printer on some color.
No, they're tickets because they've got blue tack on the back from when I used to stick them on the walls. They're and I've written on this one for some reason.
They don't look like proper tickets to me. They just look like little slips of paper.
It's a stub from this is how tickets used to look in Britain back in the day, in the Odeon theatres particularly, which were cinemas and concert venues.
Oh, there's a shortage on paper, mate. We can't use anything fancy for them tickets.
The price would go up. The price would go up. The ticket would get smaller. I've actually only got one ticket left in this pile that I managed to drag out, and it's another band I haven't mentioned tonight at all. They started as a punk band, but became something much, much more than that. It was XTC. And they were my favourite band for a long, long time. Still are one of my favourite bands.
How did they get their name?
Yeah, I tried to buy a ticket for them, and I ended up with a handful of pills.
I think it was something sexual rather than something drug related, but I may be wrong. If you've never seen the movie about them, which was made a couple of years ago, it's really good. A documentary about their career. It's excellently made. It's It's worth a watch. Great band, and they started so many things. They did so many genres that they were ahead of. Anyway, watch that. Dear God, for instance, is a great song they made, which was a big college hit in America. And a lot of bands came after that aped that sound, you know. Anyway, that was my top
Like,
5.
Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret?
Yes.
Yeah.
Dear God. Very controversial, but that was they kind of predated some of this, I don't know what you would call it, 90s psychedelic stuff, post-psychedelic stuff that came in. There was a lot of bands ended up sounding like them. Great little
Tame
pop
Impala, or are they later? I like Tame Impala. That's
yeah. The thing about XTC was that Andy Partridge, the singer and lead of the band, got stage fright, and so this was one of the last tours they ever played. And they only played 2 or 3 tours, and then he gave up because he can't perform live. He's just too frightened. And he says, why should I bother? I can just go in the studio and make records. Who cares? So,
hey, the Beatles said that.
That's right. So anyway, that was Oh, Courtney's having problems. Sorry, Courtney. Don't worry about it. So that was, I mean, I don't know. We've mentioned a lot of bands and groups. If you guys got anybody that you feel is undervalued or something you think we should listen to in that genre, something you think, and why is it good to you?
I mentioned it before, but I'll mention them again. Suicidal Tendencies.
Suicidal Tendencies.
That first album, I have listened to it since high school, and it's still as good now as it was all the way back then. For whatever reason, just random happenstance, I never, listened to any of their later stuff. I mean, everybody kind of knows Institutionalized in the new wave arena, but there's actually a lot of really good songs on that album.
Cool.
The Buzzcocks keeps getting mentioned, and funnily enough for me, I never heard of the Buzzcocks until the 90s because I got into Pete Shelley's synth stuff that he was doing in the 80s with XL1. And then I was just kind of, randomly stumbling upon the fact that he was previously in a band called Buzzcocks. And I went and there was a CD at my local used record store. It's what's it called? It's just this, it's a collection of all the singles. Singles Going Steady, that's what it's called.
Oh yeah.
And I was like, wow, every song on here is good,
Great pop band.
because it was culled from all their stuff.
Yeah, but as a pop band, they made very catchy songs, albeit with the kind of energy of punk, but very catchy. They were pop musicians, and Pete Shelley of the Buzzcocks made some great solo records in the early 80s, some great electronic stuff, and again, very catchy stuff.
Homo Sapien and XL1.
Homo Sapiens, a great
did
example.
another album later, which I haven't gotten around to getting.
Yeah. So they've played again since. I mean, I think they're still going. They reform every so often. Just to answer Christian Hooten, thank you for being in the chat, Christian. I've noticed you doing a lot of stuff in there today. I really appreciate it. Genesis better with or worse without Peter Gabriel? I think the best version of Genesis was with Ray Wilson. So that's my answer to that.
Oh, nice.
See, you didn't expect that, did you?
Subverted our expectations.
That's subversive for you, Ray Wilson.
I know it's kind of heresy, but I kind of like the Phil Collins Genesis.
I'm the same, and we're getting off punk here. My favorite my favorite 3 Genesis albums are, well, 4 maybe, are Wind and Wuthering, Trick of the Tail, and then there were 3 in Duke. That's the period I like the best. Sorry, Peter Gabriel.
And when you listen to it, do you dress up in like a
I wear a flower,
a raincoat,
and a flower.
And
just a raincoat. If
grab your axe.
I do.
Spread out some newspaper on the floor.
I do. I look like a dirty old man, Uncle Ernie.
I like all the Peter Gabriel solo stuff, but the stuff with Genesis, I mean, the proggies rave about it so much, but I'm just like, it's just kind of,
I mean,
it doesn't do anything for me.
Selling England by the Pound is pretty good, and Firth of Fifth is a masterpiece, as good as any song ever made in rock. But generally speaking, Peter Gabriel's stuff was a bit fiddly in Genesis. But anyway, anyone else have any lost classics? Now, Captain, you being in New Zealand, generally speaking, what's the music scene like there? I know it's been difficult with lockdowns there, like here, but is it thriving, would you say? Or are you making a cup of tea?
Sorry, what's that, Full T?
I was saying, in New Zealand, is the music scene generally thriving there these days, or
I haven't got a clue. I'm just here in the back cave making my own. I don't really interact with the outside world.
Sure.
My son likes hip hop, but that's probably through my influence. But I try and throw everything at him. He seems to have chosen hip hop.
Yeah. Well, I'm just wondering. I mean, yeah, obviously, Crowded House were a New Zealand band, were pretty big. I haven't really heard much since.
I did see a couple of concerts back in the day. Actually, there was Zowie. There were a couple of others actually. Now you mentioned it. There's a few singer-songwriters. There's that Lord. She's from New Zealand, isn't it? Tennis.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Oh, my brain. Why do you do this? That one. What's her face? Thingamajig. Bow, 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 bow. See, no, I'll have to get back to you later. But yeah, there's a couple of others, and they're all great. Kimbra. There's another one. And then there's a bit of Kiwi hip hop actually. So there's a few local MCs.
Well, that's what I was wondering because you mentioned hip hop, and I thought, that, New Zealand's got to have some of its own homegrown stuff.
There's a lot. Tiki Tane. So actually, so now you mention it, I lie. There's a lot of Kiwi music that's great that I probably wouldn't have heard of if I wasn't here.
No, that's good.
And be a bit of reggae influence for some reason. So there's what's that other band name escapes me, but Based on a True Story is the name of the album. So just look up Kiwi music based on a true story.
Based on a true story. I'm just gonna make
that band. Them lot.
Alrighty. So alack, I'm gonna have to wind it up now, I'm afraid, while Courtney's coming back, just so I can wave her off. I gotta wind up, unfortunately. I know we could probably go for another 8 hours, but
I had to come back in. You're talking non-punk.
It's gonna happen, it's gonna happen. Wait till I get to the Prague special show. That's gonna be a good one.
That's fine.
It's coming.
It'll be an 8-hour show.
It'll be an 8-hour show, and that will just be the intro. That's the overture.
Friday Night Tights.
The overture,
That's the overture. It'll be an episode of Friday Night Tights. It'll never get to the point.
Just spend a whole hour on flute.
I could. Not the skin flute though. That would be Toxic's job. But,
the what?
Yeah.
The skin flute.
I have another band I'm wondering if you've heard of. That 70s rock fan is the Addicts.
Oh God, yeah.
Remember the Addicts?
Yeah, I do.
They were dressed up with the clockwork, and then Monkey had like that was the singer's name, Monkey.
They weren't Australian, were they? I know the Saints were Australian. I'm trying to think. The Addicts. They might have been.
I thought they were British.
They might be British. Well, British.
That's how I was trying to think up. Thank you, Brain. Got there in the end.
What was it, Captain?
Lady Hawk. Right. Back of the van. Dust Till Dawn. Paris is Burning.
Yeah.
But that's not punk really. But it's kind of slightly edgy rock.
Lady Hawk, not like the movie.
Hawk, with an E at the end. Well, that's her business. But
I've written that down, and I will look that up for sure. Thank you.
Yeah, Delirium, great video. But yeah, Dust Till Dawn, bang bang, Dust Till Dawn.
Okay.
After this show, I'm going to be mainly listening to Lady Hawk. So yeah,
and watching the movie.
Great music and use it. Did I mention Tiki Tane? Brilliant. Yep, more.
You did. Certainly the Addicts.
The Addicts were British, by the way.
No, they were British. Oh, they're from England. That's almost Australia. I mean, I'm Scottish. England's almost Australia. They've got the same accent. It's truth. Bloody hell. I mean, mate, Cobber. Leave it at. It's truth.
Never mind the bollocks.
Blue. What's your favourite colour, Blue? What's your name, Bruce? Right. Thank you all. It's been great. Before I see you all off, I'd like to thank the chat for all being here. You've stuck it out through nearly 3 hours of our stuff.
Bollocks.
Bollocks. You never minded the bollocks, and you got them. By God, you got them. But yeah, you've all been great. I could name you all, but there's actually been so many of you. I would I'd miss somebody, but you've stuck it out all the way through, and I love that because these music shows are great. We love doing them. The panel here we love doing them. It's our little corner of the fellowship is to do music, and that's what we're doing here, music chat. So it's lovely, isn't it? So thank you all very much. I appreciate you being here and your support. We'll do more of this for sure next week. We'll do something I haven't yet quite decided what it's going to be, but it'll be about music. It won't be punk this time. We may go the other way. It could be prog. Maybe I'll do Bulgarian folk music.
Oh, my
top-selling bagpipe hymns of the 14th century.
That's right.
Gregorian chants.
Gregorian chants on the bagpipes, though.
They went a bit off the.
That's a 2-minute show.
Based on a true story, Kiwi band Fat Freddy's Drop. Dub and jazz apparently. But yeah, check them out.
Split Ends. I've got every Split Ends album on vinyl. Did you know that?
What? I accept your apology.
I do have them.
How do you have split ends if you're bald?
Oh, come on. That was a nice one. Come on. He could be...
I have a lot of hair, just not on my head. And you don't want to know that.
One.
Right, so I'm gonna see you all out in a disorderly fashion, and you're gonna feel free to flip me the middle finger and tell me to go fuck myself because it's a punk show.
Go fuck yourself!
Who wants to go first? You bastards, you rotten bastards. Courtney wants to go first. So Courtney, I don't have a special.
Only because I'm probably gonna get booted out.
I'm gonna have to get a special piece of music for you, but right now you're gonna have to say, except for something not punk. So that's what you're getting. So Courtney,
is that what it was?
It was
AC/DC.
Went very quick. So please feel free to plug anything you want to plug or say anything you want to say. No, your time's up. Let's go.
That album right here, that album right there, everyone check it out. If you haven't heard Young, Loud, and Snotty, one of the best punk albums, in my opinion, of all time. And other than that, my channel, it's Courtney's Fellowship of Oddballs. I do Insomniac streams pretty much once a week on either Friday or Saturday nights. And that's it right now. I'm on other channels, but it doesn't matter. It's irrelevant.
It's irreverent. And I think irreverent. And I think your channel is in the chat.
Right now, so I'm just
I've just added excuse me, I've just added the captains. I noticed it wasn't in the bot. That bot's going to have to be tamed because it's far too pushy. Thank you very much, Courtney. I really appreciate hanging out with you and you joining us, and we'll do it again.
Yeah, I don't know what anyone's saying, but I'm frozen. So bye, everyone.
You're frozen again. Yeah. Oh, there you go. You moved a little bit. So if you don't mind going next, my friend, we'll do the captain.
Well, in the spirit of punk, I'm already a dinosaur. I'm Pete Townsend. So forget about, never mind the fucking Cockney bollocks. Check out Dalek451. He is the Sex Pistols of YouTube. Subscribe immediately to my good friend Dalek451. He is an anarchist.
Yeah, is he a Hersham boy?
Hersham boys.
Hersham boys.
Right now, we'll let you know. Subscribe now to Dalek451. Exterminate.
I just realised I never got to my punks or posers section. I'm going to leave that for a future show.
Boys, Hersham boys.
But thank you very much, Captain. I appreciate it very, very much. And I don't, as I say, I don't have a special montage for you, but I could give you this.
Sound like a cop to me.
So there you go.
Nice.
Nice. My esteemed executive producer has dropped out. No, he hasn't. He's still here. No, he hasn't. He's dropped out.
I dropped out and came back in.
You came back. That's it. You came back. Somebody else has dropped out.
Legalize?
No, Legalize is here. I know Toxic left, but I think it's Courtney keeps dropping in and out. But she's out right now. So anyway,
well, so she was right. She said she might be the first one to drop out.
That's right. So
I'm very glad she could join us.
Did she turn on, tune in, and drop out though? This is the question. So yeah. Speak to me, my friend.
No, well, thank you for inviting me back as always. I'm glad I got to join you from the beginning of the show this time. And I know I've been out for maybe a month from my own channel due to computer technical issues. But I got good news because I put my new parts in and I just got Windows installed, so I'll be back in no time. And you'll be the first to know.
Cool. Which
Very excited.
Parts? Are these the bionic parts that Toxic was putting in too?
Yeah, I got my cybernetic bionic M.2 hard drive that I had to graft onto my motherboard. You know, with living tissue.
Frankenstein monster you've built there, then.
Yeah.
Skynet.
You know, there was a real Skynet in China, but that's for another time.
Indeed. Well, anyway, thank you again for joining me, sir. I do always appreciate your presence, buddy.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah. Well, for one of us, it has, I'm sure. But I'm not saying who. Legalize, my friend. I do very much appreciate you joining me again. I'm hoping you're willing to be a regular on these music panels. So, have you anything to promote, my friend?
Oh, it's been my pleasure to join you guys and chime in here. I don't have anything really personally to promote for myself, but I'm going to leave a recommend for Suicidal Tendencies' first album, self-titled. Definitely check that out. One of my favorite tracks on there is called Your Mommy's Dead. And another recommend.
Let them down gently. That's what I say.
And another recommend is a kind of quasi-industrial punk band from Chicago called Big Black. And I would recommend the compilation Hammer Party that brings together a couple of their early EPs onto a single CD.
Hammer Party sounds too much like an MC Hammer compilation.
Oh, no. It's not anything at all like that. Think a ball peen hammer to the head. It's kind of more like that.
That's more like
that kind of hammer party.
It's more like it.
Will not do the job. You really, for proper insertion, you need the ball peen for real. Anyway,
that's right.
Never mind the ball. Never mind the ball peen. That would be
if you don't hear the skull resonating after you swung, it means you didn't swing hard enough.
Right. It's all in the bada swing.
You should hear a nice ping as it bounces off the skull.
Never mind the ball peen. It's legalized.
I may be streaming.
You held out for Tony Q, you motherfucker, you.
I may be streaming some bagging and boarding of comics on my channel tomorrow with just mirroring the audio from the real BBC, Gary and Az. Gary's inspired me to rebag my entire comic collection, so I'm gonna be
to rebag them. It means you have to debag them first.
That's right. They're all in polypropylene bags, and they need proper my lights, as Gary wants
everyone
to tell
enjoys
us.
a good debagging.
Sure. I went the opposite way. I'm putting deliberate coffee stains on everything, starting with Amazing Spider-Man 252. I don't care.
Yeah. Well, you know what they call that, Captain? They call that the patina, and that's worth more.
That's the punk way to collect comics.
Burn it all down.
Smash them up and jam them into the bag and crush them.
Have your way, Oxygen. Here it comes.
Did I play a little clip for you, Legalize? I don't know if I.
No, I'm good.
No, I gotta have something for you.
Oh, yeah, I need a musical outro. What song
Close
is
enough. That's Van Halen.
I know it's Van Halen.
You really got me.
Oh, okay.
I think.
I was like,
I think that's the solo in the middle, but I've got to get some new ones. But this takes so long for me to.
Isn't that officially the first ever heavy metal record? You really got me by the Kinks.
I would make a good case for it being that. Yes, I think a good case could be made.
What year is that? 64?
64, yeah. And it had the format. It had the riff heavy thing where they're all playing the same riff. Had the break in the middle, the solo in the middle. It could be considered the first heavy metal record. Certainly a progenitor of it.
Nice.
Anyway, I will now plug virtually nothing because I did put a science fiction video up last week. Now I'm back at work. Now video production is slowed to a crawl. But there will be more. I'm working on more top 5 music things like I was serious about the vocoder one. That's a video that I'm working on. Top 5 vocoder songs in rock. The top 5 flute one was so much fun to do. I thought I'll do the vocoder. After that, I'm going on to accordion.
Even 5? I mean, after Frampton, what's left?
Oh, this Joe Walsh. He's another one that does a bit of it. But anyway, this is the fun.
We have more philosophy shows. Why do we exist? Why are we here? What is consciousness? Are we all part of Darius's imagination? I really think we are.
We are a holographic projection of Darius's consciousness.
I believe that is the case.
Because we're living inside a black hole.
When Darius goes
white
to
hole.
disappear.
So, but there will be more videos coming. I will be tomorrow night on Toxic Tuesday on 32 Flavors of Nick Visor's channel as usual. Tomorrow's movie is Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas.
Yes.
So, love it. Friday night, MFR Cocktail Lounge on Foulball Productions. I will be there later in the night. And I'll be popping up in various chats and places and prostituting myself if anyone wants to invite me on their show. So
good words.
Exactly. So once again, I'm a prostitute for another guy or something like that. So once again, thank you, my panel. Thank you, Courtney and Toxic and Comix for being here. They've left, but thank you guys too. I really appreciate it. And thank you to everyone in the chat. I hope you all have a great evening. And I will see you all very soon. And so until then, I'm going to try and play in the outro again. I need a producer. Where is he? Good night.
Well,